History is not just a series of dates and events. It's a collection of shadows, whispers, and untold stories. Throughout the ages, there have been mysteries so disturbing, so chilling, that even the bravest minds dare not face them. What happened to the lost city of Atlantis? Who, or what, are the true origins of the Dyatlov Pass incident? And what secrets lie hidden beneath the surface of our own world, waiting to be uncovered? For the next 3 hours, we'll uncover some of history's most terrifying enigmas, secrets that might just change everything you thought you knew. So sit back, keep your mind open, and prepare for the unexplainable. Beneath the pale light of the Arctic sky, the rugged coastline of western Greenland stretches into the horizon, where sharp mountains rise from icy waters. Here, the landscape is stark, unforgiving, and eerily quiet. Snow and ice coat the earth for most of the year, while the distant winds whisper across the ruins of what was once a thriving Norse settlement. In the late 10th century, a group of Norsemen, led by Eric the Red, arrived on these shores. They called the land Greenland, despite its frozen expanse, and for centuries, their presence seemed to promise something more than just survival. The settlers established farms, built churches, and carved out a home in the cold, remote wilderness. But by the early 15th century, they were gone. Entire communities disappeared, leaving behind only ruins, artifacts, and the questions that have haunted historians ever since. What happened to them? Over the years, various explanations have been proposed. The most widely accepted theory suggests that the settlers succumbed to the harsh environment. The Little Ice Age, a period of cooling that began around the 14th century, may have made farming impossible, and dwindling resources would have led to starvation. The settlers, isolated and unable to maintain their once thriving society, could have been driven to abandon their homes. They may have been forced to leave in search of food, or worse, simply perished in the unforgiving cold. It is a tragedy as old as time. A people caught between ambition and nature's wrath, fading into obscurity. But then there are other, less conventional theories, some more speculative, others more imaginative. Some suggest that the settlers were victims of hostile forces, perhaps even indigenous tribes. While the Inuit had lived in Greenland long before the Norse arrived, the two cultures coexisted largely without conflict. However, could it be that as the settlers faced the worsening climate, tensions escalated, leading to violent encounters? Or could they have been pushed out by a rival group, one unknown to history? The silence of the land offers no answers, only more questions. Others suggest that the settlers didn't leave at all. What if they simply integrated into the Inuit culture? The Greenlandic Inuit, known for their adaptability in extreme environments, might have welcomed them into their communities. With the collapse of the Norse culture, perhaps the settlers merged with indigenous peoples, their unique heritage slowly vanishing into the annals of time, their legacy lost. If this is the case, there could be traces of their bloodlines, their customs, even their language, hidden among the Inuit population to this day. Yet another theory, more fantastical but still haunting, speculates that the Norse settlers were swept away by forces beyond comprehension. Some even point to strange reports of unexplained disappearances from other parts of the world, suggesting that the settlers may have met their end through unknown means. Did some vanish into a secret, lost world beneath the ice, where the land is forever preserved, but its people are trapped in time? The ruins left behind are haunting in their own right. The stone foundations of long-abandoned farms, churches, and homes stand as silent monuments to a people who once dared to tame this unforgiving place. Some buildings were clearly built with meticulous care, meant to last through the harshest conditions. Yet now, they crumble. The objects recovered from these sites tell stories of lives lived in isolation. Simple tools, pottery, religious artifacts, each one an echo of a forgotten world. And yet, despite the wealth of material evidence, the fate of the Norse settlers remains shrouded in mystery. No clear records of their final days exist. Was it the harsh climate that broke them, or something more? Something hidden beneath the ice, or lost in the pages of history? Could they have left behind clues, buried beneath centuries of snow and rock, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves? The mystery lingers, and as the winds howl across the deserted shores of Greenland, one can't help but wonder, what really happened to the Norse settlers of Western Greenland? Are their stories lost forever to time, or is there something still out there, waiting to be uncovered? The muddy waters of the River Wash swirl in the distance, its shores quiet and unassuming. Yet beneath this deceptively calm surface, a legend stirs. On the evening of October 1216, the storm was fierce. Winds howled and rains pounded relentlessly as King John of England and his entourage fought to escape a retreating army. His treasure, his crown jewels, symbols of royal power, were carried along with the royal army, desperately seeking safety. Yet, amidst the chaos, disaster struck. The storm, merciless and violent, was not a mere storm. It was the cause of one of the most enigmatic losses in British history. As the royal forces crossed the marshy terrain, the wagons laden with the crown jewels and the king's possessions sank into the water, disappearing without a trace. A royal army, fleeing from its own enemies, now became the subject of history's most disturbing mysteries. For while the storm had stolen much, it was the crown jewels, the priceless symbols of England's power, that vanished without explanation. The location where the treasures were lost, now a seemingly tranquil expanse of mudflats, is no ordinary place. The River Wash, winding through the east of England, is a vast, sweeping tidal basin, a treacherous landscape known for swallowing the unwary. In the days following the storm, desperate searches were conducted by the royal family, and many historians have speculated that the crown jewels may have been hidden somewhere along these shores, covered by mud and silt, or swept away forever. However, despite multiple attempts over the centuries to locate these lost treasures, no conclusive evidence has surfaced. Some even speculate that the jewels were hidden in plain sight, scattered across the wetlands, and perhaps moved by time or nature to locations so remote they remain beyond the reach of all but the most determined adventurers. But if the crown jewels were lost here, why has no trace of them been found? Could it be that the shifting tides have concealed them under layers of sediment? Or did the crown jewels, once symbols of untold wealth and power, vanish so thoroughly that they have become mere myths, whispered about in history's most remote corners? The theories vary, yet each one adds to the aura of mystery surrounding this royal tragedy. What is certain, however, is that this loss was not merely a blow to King John personally, but to England itself. King John's reign, marked by struggle and turmoil, had already seen his defeat in France and his subsequent signing of the Magna Carta, a document that would go on to define the future of English law. Now, this loss, this catastrophe in the heart of a storm, only deepened the sense of collapse that surrounded the king. For many, King John's retreat, marked by the loss of his treasures, is a fitting symbol of his reign. Already unpopular and often reviled by his contemporaries, he had few allies. His inability to secure his treasure, the symbols of his authority, seemed a perfect reflection of his inability to maintain control over his kingdom. The jewels, lost and perhaps forever hidden, came to represent a final severing of the crown's grip on power. Yet, despite centuries of searching, the crown jewels have not been recovered. The mystery remains unresolved, and each new search only fuels further speculation. Could they still be out there, hidden deep beneath the waters of the River Wash? Or have they been scattered to the winds, with only fragments of their legendary luster left behind in forgotten corners of the landscape. One theory, which has gained traction in recent years, is that the treasure could still be located along the shores of the River Wash, waiting to be discovered by a modern-day expedition. Some believe that the position of the lost treasure is encoded in ancient documents or maps, cryptic references hidden in plain sight. The idea that the jewels could have been secretly moved before they sank into the river's depths adds another layer of intrigue. Was there a deliberate attempt to hide the crown jewels to prevent them from falling into enemy hands? Could someone within King John's circle have betrayed him, making sure the treasure was hidden so deeply that it would remain lost forever? This theory, however, is not without its critics. Skeptics argue that the storm, so catastrophic and brutal, would have made such a secret relocation impossible. Instead, they suggest that the jewels were lost irrevocably in the flood, their final resting place forever claimed by the river's merciless tide. There are also those who claim that the jewels never actually existed in the form we imagine them today. Could the crown jewels have been an elaborate myth, constructed after the fact to add weight to the already tragic and dramatic story of King John's downfall? What if the jewels were a symbol of power rather than a physical object, a representation of something more elusive, something to be passed down in stories rather than in gold and gem? The very nature of the jewels could itself be part of the mystery. Yet, throughout the centuries, the legend has persisted, woven into the fabric of English history. Every so often, treasure hunters and archaeologists converge on the region, inspired by the hope that they might be the ones to unravel the secret that has defied so many. There is an undeniable pull to the River Wash, a quiet obsession that lingers in the air, a belief that perhaps, just beneath the surface, something remains hidden. For centuries, the disappearance of King John's crown jewels has sparked imaginations, fueled theories, and driven countless quests. But, as of today, no one has found them. The River Wash has kept its secret well. Perhaps the jewels were swallowed by time, buried beneath layers of silt, or perhaps they lie waiting, ready to reveal themselves to those with the right knowledge, the right tools, or the right timing. But as the tides shift and the seasons change, the question remains: where are they? What happened to the jewels, to the army that was meant to protect them, and to the king who trusted his fate to the storm? Were they simply lost to history? Or is the truth still out there, just waiting to be uncovered? As the search continues, the mystery of King John's lost treasure endures, a tantalizing enigma that refuses to fade from the pages of history. The answers, if they exist, are buried deep. On the evening of July 25, 2001, residents of a small village in Kerala, India, stepped outside to witness something they would never forget. The sky was alive with something strange. It was as if the heavens themselves had opened, not with rain, but with something far more ominous. Red droplets, like drops of blood, fell from the sky, staining the earth below. Initially, it was brushed off as a freak atmospheric anomaly, but as the days went by, this blood rain continued to fall, drawing attention from scientists, mystics, and the media alike. For weeks, the air in Kerala was thick with uncertainty. Was this a sign from the gods, as some locals suggested? Or was it something far more unsettling, a phenomenon that, in its unpredictability, posed a threat to both the natural world and our understanding of it? The event, which became known as the Blood Rain of Kerala, was not the first time the world had seen such a phenomenon. The earliest recorded instances of blood rain date back to the 5th century BC, where reports of red rain falling on ancient civilizations scattered across the Mediterranean and Asia have been noted in both historical records and mythologies. But why has blood, or something that resembles blood, occasionally fallen from the sky throughout history? And what does it reveal about the natural world, and perhaps something more profound about our place within it. In ancient Rome, the poet Ovid wrote of a rain of blood that fell in 66 BC, an event so disturbing that it was recorded in official annals. In 1831, a similar event occurred in England, with the strange crimson rain staining clothing and causing widespread panic. Over the centuries, such occurrences have been observed in scattered corners of the globe, from the Americas to Europe to Asia. But the unsettling image remains the same: rain that is not water, but something more disturbing. What causes this eerie phenomenon? Mainstream science points to the possibility of microscopic organisms, particularly algae, being swept up into the atmosphere. The red pigment of these organisms, known as Haematococcus pluvialis, is believed to be responsible for the coloring of the rain. When these microorganisms are suspended in clouds and fall to the earth, the rain can appear red, though the cause is entirely natural, related to algae blooms or the presence of dust and pollutants, which are then carried by the wind. But even with this scientific explanation, the mystery remains. Is this phenomenon truly as benign as it seems, or could there be something more at play? What if, throughout history, these episodes of blood rain weren't just the result of biological or meteorological processes? Could they have been signs, signals from nature, or from something beyond our understanding? Some skeptics point out that the blood rain is often accompanied by other anomalies, like unusual weather patterns or inexplicable events. In 1896, after an episode of blood rain fell on India, the region was struck by a sudden and deadly famine that has been blamed on a subsequent crop failure. Was there a connection between the rain and the famine? Could these mysterious rains, falling so unexpectedly, have a hidden agenda, a deeper meaning or warning encoded in their arrival? Then there is the question of the human mind's tendency to attach meaning to strange occurrences. Could the repeated appearance of blood rain, often in times of social, political, or environmental unrest, be part of a long-standing collective cultural response to calamity? After all, blood has long been a symbol of sacrifice, of change, and of doom. In many ancient cultures, the appearance of blood rain was interpreted as a portent, an omen signaling divine displeasure or an impending disaster. It was a harbinger of war, famine, or death. Could the cultural lens through which people view these events shape their perception of them? Or do these phenomena have significance beyond the supernatural? As strange as these occurrences may seem, it is impossible to ignore the recurring idea that blood rain may be connected to something larger than the physical world we can see. Some have speculated that these rains, in their oddity, could symbolize a rupture in the natural order, a disruption in the fabric of our environment. What if the appearance of blood in the sky is an attempt by nature itself to communicate something far more profound, something hidden from our understanding? Could the blood rain be nature's way of reacting to the strains we place on the earth through overconsumption, deforestation, and the destruction of ecosystems? Others still suggest that the rains could be a symptom of an even darker reality, an atmosphere increasingly affected by pollutants, chemicals, or the consequences of climate change. The very fact that these occurrences have become more frequent in the modern world, at least in some places, suggests that we are not merely witnessing natural events, but rather the unsettling consequences of humanity's impact on the Earth's atmosphere. Despite scientific and cultural explanations, there are still those who look to the more mysterious and speculative possibilities. The theory of cosmic interference has gained some traction in recent years, with some suggesting that the blood rain could be linked to strange solar or cosmic events, perhaps even the arrival of particles or elements from deep space. Could the atmosphere be reacting to an external force, something beyond the planet itself? Could we be seeing evidence of something larger and more far-reaching, an event linked to the stars, to the universe, and to forces that stretch beyond our comprehension? One particularly unsettling theory is that blood rain could be a side effect of military experiments or biological warfare. After all, the appearance of unusual substances in the air has long been associated with efforts to test chemical or biological agents. Could it be that such experiments, intended to test the limits of biological warfare or environmental manipulation, are inadvertently causing the rains? While this theory remains largely unsubstantiated, it adds an eerie layer of uncertainty to the already mysterious phenomenon. Despite all these potential explanations, no single theory has fully explained the nature of blood rain. The mystery of what exactly causes these rains to fall remains unresolved. Some answers, it seems, will always lie just beyond our reach, hidden in the folds of science, myth, and history. As with many historical enigmas, blood rain leaves us with more questions than answers. What are we to make of this seemingly natural event, which stirs such profound feelings of unease and awe? Is it simply the result of microorganisms, atmospheric changes, or pollutants? Or do the occurrences of blood rain signify something far more enigmatic, something hidden in the history of the world, waiting to be discovered? As we continue to explore the strangest and most unsettling mysteries of history, one thing is certain: the blood rain chronicles are far from over. The skies, it seems, still hold many secrets, and as science and speculation continue to evolve, we are left to wonder if there is something deeper, something far more unsettling, at work behind the phenomenon of blood rain. Could it be that nature itself is trying to communicate with us, warning us of the precarious balance we've set in motion? Or is it just another puzzle, one that, for now, remains unsolved? The sun sets over the ancient city of Constantinople, its golden rays casting long shadows over the crumbling walls and the bustling markets that have survived the ebb and flow of centuries. But on one particular evening, in the year 562 AD, something far more unsettling occurred. It was not the fall of dusk that captivated the city, but the sky itself, a sky that seemed to burn, casting an eerie red glow over the entire city. For several days, the people of Constantinople watched in horror as the heavens turned a deep crimson, as though the very air above the city had been set aflame. Scholars, priests, and common folk alike, unable to explain the phenomenon, turned to superstition and myth. The flames in the sky were seen as an omen, an unmistakable sign of impending doom. The burning sky, seen by many as a harbinger of disaster, was more than just a celestial curiosity. It became a symbol of the uncertainty and fear that gripped the heart of the Byzantine Empire. To the people of the 6th century, such events were more than natural occurrences. They were divine messages, warnings sent by the gods, or perhaps by an angry god. For the Christians of Constantinople, the burning sky was a terrifying vision, one that resonated deeply with their beliefs of divine judgment and punishment. Could this mysterious phenomenon have been a sign of something catastrophic on the horizon? Was it an omen for the empire, one of the greatest cities in the world, on the verge of a new and unsettling chapter? The records from this time are sparse, and the descriptions of the event are vague, yet they are consistent in their portrayal of an unsettling vision in the sky. The Emperor Justinian, who ruled at the time, is said to have taken the event seriously, perhaps seeing it as a divine warning amidst the turbulence of his reign. Justinian was no stranger to omens, having already overseen a series of challenges, from political unrest to plague, that seemed to plague the empire. Historians are divided on the cause of this strange celestial event. Some point to natural phenomena that could have caused the appearance of a burning sky. The most plausible explanation offered by modern science is a massive dust storm, perhaps originating from the Sahara Desert or the volcanic eruptions in distant lands that carried a fine layer of ash into the upper atmosphere. This ash could have caused the sky to appear red, a phenomenon known today as volcanic twilight. Similar events have been recorded after significant eruptions, where ash particles cause light to scatter in such a way that it creates a fiery hue in the sky. This theory, while scientifically grounded, does not quite capture the cultural and emotional impact the event had on the citizens of Constantinople. To them, it was not just a natural occurrence. It was a cosmic event, tied deeply to the fate of their city and their empire. In fact, the burning sky was contemporaneously linked to the devastating plague of Justinian, which began shortly thereafter. This terrifying plague, which ravaged the population of Constantinople and spread across the empire, was viewed by many as a direct consequence of the celestial warning. Could the burning sky have foretold the arrival of this deadly disease, as so many believed? In the centuries following the event, a number of scholars have suggested that the burning sky was not merely a result of natural atmospheric disturbances, but was perhaps something far more mysterious, something that remains unexplainable even today. One theory posits that the sky was not just red, but that it may have been filled with a strange light that flickered, perhaps caused by an unknown cosmic event. Could it have been a comet, an errant asteroid, or some kind of unexplained atmospheric disturbance that caused this unprecedented visual spectacle? Others have speculated that the event could have been linked to celestial alignments or unusual astronomical phenomena, rare events that have been known to influence the atmosphere in surprising ways. Could the burning sky have been caused by the alignment of distant planets or stars, altering the very nature of light on Earth? Or was the event somehow tied to the electromagnetic forces of the sun, perhaps a solar flare, or an event we cannot yet fully comprehend? The burning sky over Constantinople. There are those, however, who entertain even more speculative theories, those that suggest that the burning sky could have been the result of a more esoteric phenomenon, one beyond the reach of modern science. Some have even proposed that it could have been a kind of atmospheric rift, a tear in the fabric of the atmosphere that allowed light from another dimension or reality to bleed through, illuminating the skies in ways we can't fully understand. Though these theories remain unproven and speculative, they speak to the enduring mystery of the event, a reminder that even the most ordinary phenomena, like the sky above us, can sometimes slip into the realm of the unexplainable. What remains most fascinating about the burning sky over Constantinople is not just the physical spectacle itself, but the profound impact it had on the people who witnessed it. The people of Constantinople, living at the heart of an empire that once seemed invincible, were already living through tumultuous times. Justinian's reign was marked by strife, from the Nika riots to the ongoing wars of reconquest and the brutal plague that struck the city. For the people of Constantinople, the burning sky was not just a scientific anomaly, it was a symbol of the fragile nature of their world. It was a reminder that even the mightiest of empires could be subject to forces beyond their control. In the aftermath of the event, as the burning sky faded into memory, the people of Constantinople had no answers, only more questions. What had they witnessed? Was it a natural phenomenon, or something far more significant? Was it a harbinger of disaster, a sign that their time was running out? Or was it simply the play of light and atmosphere, a fleeting moment in the natural world that would forever remain shrouded in mystery? Perhaps the most profound question raised by the burning sky is not the scientific explanation for the phenomenon, but the deeper implications it has on our understanding of history. What does it mean when the sky itself seems to burn? What does it say about the fragility of the world and the impermanence of even the greatest civilizations? And how often have we, throughout history, witnessed strange occurrences in the sky that have been lost to time, their meaning buried beneath layers of history, myth, and legend? As we look back on this moment in history, we are left with more questions than answers. The burning sky over Constantinople may have been a natural event, a result of volcanic ash, dust, or solar flares, but it also carries with it the weight of something far larger. It is a symbol of the unknown, of the mysterious forces that shape our world in ways we are only beginning to understand. In the end, the burning sky remains an enduring enigma, a reminder that, no matter how much we know, there will always be mysteries that elude our grasp. And as we look up at the heavens today, we might wonder, what strange, unexplained events will the future hold? The North Sea, often shrouded in a veil of mist, stretches across the horizon with an eerie quiet. Waves crash relentlessly against the jagged rocks that line the coasts of Scotland, Denmark, and Norway, and the wind howls over the cold waters, carrying with it the faintest whispers of lost things. It is in these waters, where the sea is known for swallowing ships whole and where sailors speak of ghosts and shipwrecks, that a legend persists. A legend of a ship that sails without a crew, a ghostly vessel appearing out of the fog, only to vanish just as suddenly as it arrives. This ship is not the stuff of fairy tales or fiction. The ghost ship of the North Sea, often called the Flying Dutchman of these northern waters, has been seen by fishermen, sailors, and naval officers over the centuries, yet no one can explain its mysterious appearances. Most recently, reports of a spectral ship have surfaced from modern-day mariners, but the phenomenon dates back to as early as the 17th century. Whether it is seen off the coast of Norway, drifting silently through the mist, or somewhere off the coast of the Shetland Islands, the ghost ship is always the same. A large, imposing vessel, its sails billowing with no one aboard, drifting as though caught between worlds. The most famous sighting of the ship was in 1809, when a British naval officer, Captain Benjamin Barker, reported seeing a large, ghostly ship appear before his crew in the dead of night. The ship was seen under full sail, its lights dimly flickering, yet its crew, if there was one, was nowhere to be found. The ship sailed silently through the waters, its mysterious presence only heightened by the eerie calm surrounding it. As the vessel approached, the ship's figurehead seemed to flicker and distort, and the crew could hear strange, unearthly sounds carried on the wind. The ghost ship, Barker reported, was sailing against the wind, a feat that no ordinary vessel could achieve. But the Flying Dutchman, as some called it, was not the first nor the last of these spectral apparitions. Over the centuries, the sightings have continued. Some report that the ship is caught in an endless loop, forever wandering the waters of the North Sea, unable to find its way home. Others claim that the ship is a portent of doom, an omen that forewarns impending disasters or misfortune for those who see it. Is this ship a lost relic from a past shipwreck, its crew doomed to sail for eternity? Or is it something far more inexplicable, a manifestation of something supernatural? There are those who argue that the phenomenon could be the result of natural optical illusions. The North Sea is notorious for its shifting fogs, which can warp the appearance of ships, creating ghostly figures that seem to materialize from the mist. This effect, known as superior mirage, occurs when light is refracted through layers of warm and cold air, bending the light around distant objects and creating distorted reflections of ships on the horizon. Could the ghost ship be nothing more than an optical illusion caused by these atmospheric conditions? In this scenario, the ship would not actually exist. Rather, it would be a trick of the light, creating a vision that unsettles sailors but has no basis in reality. Yet, if optical illusions explain some of these sightings, they fail to account for the consistency of the reports. The descriptions of the ghost ship, its size, its sails, its eerie silence, remain strikingly similar throughout the centuries, across different locations and different witnesses. Furthermore, many accounts come from experienced sailors who would be familiar with the natural phenomena of the sea. Could so many seasoned mariners be mistaken? Or is it possible that the ship is something far stranger, something that defies the laws of nature? There are other theories that venture into the more speculative, though no less fascinating, realms. Some believe the ghost ship is the result of a long-lost tragedy, a ship that met its fate in violent storm or war, and whose crew is now doomed to sail forever, bound by some curse. These theories draw upon folklore from across the world, where ghost ships are said to carry the spirits of lost sailors, wandering the oceans for eternity. In some stories, the appearance of such a ship is a warning, a harbinger of death for those who encounter it. Is the ghost ship of the North Sea the result of such a fate? A cursed vessel, its crew forever trapped in the afterlife, sailing the seas until they can find peace? Yet another possibility is that the ship may be connected to the Flying Dutchman legend, a tale that has captivated maritime cultures for centuries. According to this story, a Dutch captain named Hendrik van der Decken, cursed by the gods for his arrogance, was doomed to sail the seas forever, unable to make port or find rest. Could the ghost ship of the North Sea be a variation of this legendary figure, a ship cursed by the gods to sail an endless journey, bound to appear to those unfortunate enough to witness it? Some maritime traditions suggest that sightings of the ship bring bad luck to those who see it, an omen of doom for sailors who are about to meet their fate. If the ghost ship is not a product of natural phenomena or folklore, then what else could it be? Could it be a glimpse into another dimension or time, a ship that exists between the worlds of the living and the dead? Some have suggested that the ghost ship is a temporal anomaly, a rift in the space-time continuum that causes a ship from the past to appear in the present. This theory would explain why the ship seems to exist without crew and why it vanishes so quickly after being sighted. Is it possible that these ships are echoes from the past, caught in a loop, momentarily visible to us as they pass through time? While some of these theories are speculative, they also point to something deeper, the persistent and unsettling human need to seek meaning in the unexplainable. The ghost ship of the North Sea, whether it is a natural phenomenon, a supernatural manifestation, or something else entirely, continues to intrigue and disturb. Each sighting, no matter how fleeting, adds to the mystery. The ship may sail silently through the fog, as it always has, but its purpose remains shrouded. The North Sea itself, with its treacherous waters and unpredictable weather, has long been a place of mystery. Could the ghost ship be a reflection of the sea's power and danger? Or is it something more, something that connects us to the unknown, to a part of history or reality that we cannot fully understand? As the fog rolls in over the water, one can't help but wonder, what is it that lies just beyond the mist? And in the quiet, uncharted depths of the North Sea, could the ghost ship still be waiting, sailing the waters between time, place, and reality, forever out of reach? The quiet, windswept coastline of Suffolk, England, has long been the setting of legends, myths, and stories that seem to rise from the very soil itself. But few tales are as unsettling as the mystery of the phantom bells of Dunwich, a town whose name is whispered among locals and visitors alike with a certain reverence and unease. Once a prosperous port, Dunwich now lies in ruins, its streets swallowed by the relentless tides of the North Sea. But even as the physical remnants of the town have disappeared into the ocean, there remains a strange, inexplicable echo, a sound that reaches through time and space, reverberating over the cliffs and across the marshes. It is said that on certain fog-filled nights, when the wind howls through the skeletal remains of Dunwich's ancient church, the sound of bells can be heard tolling from the depths of the sea. The faint, mournful ringing is often described as a haunting melody, a reminder of what was once lost. But the thing that makes these bells so unsettling is that they should not be there at all. The church that once housed them has been gone for centuries, swallowed by the encroaching waves, and the bells themselves disappeared long before anyone could truly make sense of it. The story of Dunwich is an ancient one. In the 13th century, the town was a thriving center of commerce, its wealth founded on the bustling port and its position on the North Sea. It boasted churches, monasteries, and even its own cathedral, a testament to the prosperity and significance of the town. But by the late 14th century, the tides had begun their relentless encroachment. What had once been a thriving metropolis was gradually claimed by the sea, as storm surges, erosion, and coastal flooding tore away at the land, swallowing the town piece by piece. The most dramatic loss occurred in 1328, when the town's church, along with its bells, was swept away in a catastrophic storm. The bells, which had tolled over the town for generations, disappeared into the depths of the sea, never to be recovered. And yet, despite the physical absence of the bells, the tolling continued to be heard, often in the dead of night or in the midst of particularly heavy fogs. Reports of the phantom bells date back to at least the 17th century, when villagers from the surrounding areas began to hear them ringing from the sea. Some claimed they heard the faint tolling from miles away, drifting across the marshes and the cliffs. Others said that on particularly foggy nights, they could hear the bells as if they were coming from beneath the earth itself, from the very heart of the town that had long since been lost. But why, centuries after the church and its bells had been lost to the waves, would anyone still hear them? The phenomenon has puzzled historians and scientists for years. Some believe that the ringing is the result of natural acoustics, caused by the peculiar geography of the area. The cliffs surrounding Dunwich create a natural echo chamber, and some suggest that the sound of bells, carried on the wind or the tide, could reverberate across the landscape in a way that gives the illusion of distant tolling. But even this explanation doesn't fully account for the peculiarities of the phenomenon. Witnesses to the phantom bells describe the sound as distinctly clear, sometimes even accompanied by the faintest vibrations, as though the bells themselves are physically present. More chillingly, there are accounts of people who claim to have heard the bells tolling at exact times, matching the intervals at which the bells would have once rung from the long-lost church. Could the sound be a trick of the mind, a result of the powerful emotions tied to the place, or is there something more to it? Some have suggested that the sound might be a form of residual haunting, an echo from the past that has become trapped in the landscape, replaying itself over time like a ghostly memory. The very land that once held the church and the bells may have absorbed the imprint of those sounds, repeating them over and over again, regardless of the passage of time. Other theories lean toward more supernatural explanations. Some believe that the tolling of the phantom bells is tied to the curse of Dunwich, a curse that was said to have been placed on the town after it was abandoned. According to local legends, the townspeople had angered the gods, and as punishment, the town was condemned to sink into the sea. The bells, as the story goes, are the souls of the townspeople themselves, ringing out in an eternal lament for the sins they committed before their demise. Could this ghostly tolling be a manifestation of that ancient curse, a reminder that the past can never truly be buried? The idea of a curse has long been part of the lore surrounding Dunwich. It is said that in the town's final days, strange and inexplicable events began to unfold. Odd disappearances, unsettling noises, and a general sense of foreboding. The townspeople, some believe, may have brought this misfortune upon themselves, and now, centuries later, their ghosts remain, tied to the bells that once rang for them. For some, the phantom bells are not merely a sound. They are a reminder of loss, of the town that once was, and of the lives that were swallowed by the sea. They serve as a stark warning that the land and the sea are inextricably linked, and that no place, no matter how grand, can escape the forces of nature. Perhaps the tolling bells, lost to time, are simply nature's way of marking that inevitability. Yet, despite all the theories and explanations, no one has been able to fully solve the mystery of the phantom bells. Where do they come from? Are they an acoustic illusion, a trick of the landscape? Or are they a deeper, more unsettling manifestation of something beyond the natural world? An echo of a tragedy that can never be erased, no matter how much time passes. Perhaps, in the end, the mystery of the phantom bells of Dunwich is not meant to be solved. Maybe the sound itself is part of the story, a sound that exists beyond explanation, just as the town itself exists only in memory. The tolling bells remain, faint and distant, reminding us that there are mysteries in the world that no amount of time or explanation can ever truly undo. And as the wind howls across the marshes and the sea rises and falls with its eternal rhythm, we are left to wonder, what other secrets, lost to the depths of time, still echo across the forgotten shores of Dunwich? Nestled in the rolling hills of Somerset, England, the ancient town of Glastonbury stands as a place where history and legend intertwine like the vines that grow across its stone ruins. Known for its medieval abbey, the town has long been a center of pilgrimage and mystery. Here, the very earth seems steeped in stories, from the myth of King Arthur's burial to the enigmatic Glastonbury Tor that rises above the landscape like a sentinel guarding ancient secrets. But amidst these well-known tales, there is one that remains more obscure and unsettling, a story that lingers like a whisper in the winds. The mystery of the silent monks of Glastonbury. It is a tale that has echoed down through the centuries, a mystery entwined in both the sacred and the unexplainable. And while the monastery once stood as a beacon of spiritual life, it is the silence that some say followed its monks to their graves that continues to haunt the town to this day. The story begins in the 12th century, during the reign of Henry II, when Glastonbury Abbey was at the height of its power and influence. The abbey had been a prominent center of monastic life for over 500 years, a place where monks and pilgrims alike sought solace in spiritual enlightenment. But by the late 12th century, something began to change in the abbey's atmosphere, something that would eventually lead to one of its greatest mysteries. It is said that a group of monks, who had once been renowned for their devotion and spiritual fervor, suddenly took a vow of silence. The circumstances surrounding this vow remain unclear, and it is precisely this uncertainty that has fueled speculation and intrigue for generations. Was it a decision made in the wake of an overwhelming spiritual experience, or was it something darker, a reaction to some hidden event that the monks felt compelled to silence themselves about? The records of the time suggest that the monks did not simply choose to be silent for a period of time. They were bound by an unspoken oath, one that rendered them mute not just in the presence of others, but in their own thoughts and prayers as well. According to some accounts, they could still communicate with each other using gestures, but words were strictly forbidden. Their silence became legendary, and those who came to visit the abbey could not help but wonder what had led these men of the cloth to abandon their voices in such a way. Theories surrounding the monks' silence are as varied as the records themselves. Some have suggested that the monks' vow was the result of a divine revelation, an event so profound that it rendered them incapable of speaking. Could they have witnessed something so sacred, or perhaps terrifying, that words seemed inadequate? Was this vow a form of penance, a way to atone for a transgression that had occurred within the monastery's walls? Other theories delve into more speculative territory, suggesting that the monks' vow of silence could have been a response to a more earthly trauma. The late 12th century was a time of upheaval, with political tensions between the church and the crown, as well as growing suspicion and paranoia among the monastic communities. Perhaps the monks had discovered something, a secret hidden within the abbey or in its sacred texts, that forced them to remain silent. Were they trying to protect something? Perhaps the relics of Saint Joseph of Arimathea, which, according to legend, had been brought to Glastonbury in the 1st century, or some other holy artifact, something so dangerous that speaking of it could cause untold harm? Then, there is the possibility that the monks' silence was not born out of some divine or supernatural event, but rather from an external, earthly force. Some have suggested that the monks were subjected to a form of punishment, perhaps a cruel directive from higher church authorities who sought to silence them for reasons unknown. Could they have been punished for some perceived heresy, or for uncovering something that threatened the power structure of the church? As is often the case with historical mysteries, the truth is clouded by time, and the records we have are fragmented and open to interpretation. The vow of silence may have lasted only a few years, or it could have been a permanent state of being for the monks. What is certain, however, is that the silence of these monks left an indelible mark on the abbey and the town of Glastonbury. Over time, their silence became an object of fascination and dread. Visitors to the abbey would sometimes report strange occurrences, the sense of an invisible presence, a weight in the air, a feeling that there was something deeply unsettling about the place. One of the most disturbing elements of the story is the impact the monks' silence had on the surrounding community. Local people began to speak of the monks as if they were no longer fully human, as though they had transcended the boundaries of the mortal world. There are records of people claiming that the monks no longer appeared to eat, sleep, or even breathe in the way that other people did. Some villagers said that the monks glided through the abbey, their faces expressionless and their eyes hollow, as if they were existing in some kind of trance. Could these reports be the result of superstition or exaggeration? Or is it possible that the monks' vow of silence caused them to become more deeply immersed in spiritual practices, to the point where they appeared to transcend ordinary human existence? Was their silence a form of spiritual asceticism, a way to break free from the earthly realm and connect with a higher plane of being? Despite the fascination with these monks, the mystery only deepened when, in 1184, the abbey was struck by a fire that decimated much of the structure, including the area where the monks had lived and prayed. The fire destroyed the records of the monastery, leaving behind little more than ruins and the memory of the monks' silence. After the fire, the monks seemed to disappear from history entirely, their fate unknown. Did they perish in the flames, or did they silently vanish into the night, never to be heard from again? In the centuries since, there have been occasional reports of strange occurrences at the ruins of Glastonbury Abbey. Sounds of whispering voices carried on the wind, glimpses of figures in the shadows, and, most unsettling of all, the faint sound of bells ringing in the distance, as though calling out from another time. The monks' vow of silence remains one of the most compelling and baffling mysteries in the history of Glastonbury. The reasons for their silence, whether divine, personal, or political, remain elusive, and perhaps they always will. But the question persists. What drove these men, devoted to God and their community, to abandon their voices? Was it a spiritual choice, a deep-seated belief that words were no longer necessary? Or was it something far darker, an attempt to protect or conceal something hidden within the walls of the abbey, something that could never be spoken aloud? The silence of Glastonbury's monks has echoed through the centuries, leaving behind only fragments of a story that may never be fully told. As we stand among the ruins today, it's impossible not to wonder, what remains hidden in the silence? Could the answers to this mystery still lie buried beneath the stones of the abbey, waiting to be uncovered? Or has the silence itself become the final, unspoken truth? The rugged Basque mountains, straddling the border between Spain and France, are a wild, untamed region, full of jagged peaks, dense forests, and deep, shadowed valleys. It is a land where the winds whip through the trees like whispered secrets, and the landscape itself seems to carry the weight of ancient legends. The very air feels thick with history, and if you listen carefully enough, you might hear echoes of stories long told in hushed voices. Among these stories is one that has persisted for centuries, a tale steeped in mystery and fear: the curse of the Basque Witches' Mountains. The Basque country is a region where folklore and reality often blur, where the line between myth and history is as thin as the mist that rolls down the mountainsides. These mountains, once a place of refuge for ancient peoples, became the heart of an unsettling chapter in European history: the persecution of witches. From the late Middle Ages through the 17th century, these rugged hills were the backdrop to some of the most intense witch hunts in history. In particular, the town of Zugarramurdi, tucked deep within the mountains, became infamous for its association with witchcraft, and the events that unfolded there would leave an indelible mark on the region's folklore. It was here, in the early 1600s, that a series of brutal trials took place, in which more than 100 individuals, mostly women, were accused of witchcraft. The Basque witches were said to have convened in the remote caves of Zugarramurdi, where they would practice dark rituals in secret, far from the prying eyes of the Catholic authorities. These rituals, which included unholy ceremonies, spells, and the worship of demons, were said to have been performed in the very heart of the mountains, among the twisting trees and hidden grottos. According to witnesses, the witches would gather around a fire, chanting incantations as the flames flickered in the darkness, summoning forces from the other world. For centuries, the Basque region had been a hotbed of paganism, and the Basque people, fiercely independent, held on to many ancient customs that had been passed down through the generations. This resistance to outside influence, particularly from the Spanish crown and the Catholic Church, made them a target for suspicion. The idea of witchcraft was deeply intertwined with local beliefs in spirits, fairies, and other supernatural forces that seemed to haunt the mountains themselves. For the Church, these ancient practices were a threat, one that had to be eradicated. The witch trials in Zugarramurdi were particularly vicious, and many of the accused were tortured into confession, with some even naming others to save themselves. The trials culminated in the infamous execution of several accused witches, and the town became infamous as a symbol of the religious zeal that drove Europe's witch hunts. But what makes the story of the Basque Witches' Mountains particularly haunting is not just the trials themselves, but the chilling aftermath, an eerie silence that seemed to descend upon the region. Local legends began to take shape, stories of a curse that would forever haunt those who dared to venture into the mountains. It was said that the spirits of the executed witches, angry and betrayed, would rise from the earth to torment the living. Some claimed to hear whispers in the wind, voices calling from the shadows of the trees, beckoning those who dared to wander too close to the caves. Others spoke of strange, unexplainable phenomena, mysterious lights flickering in the distance, or the sudden onset of eerie coldness in the otherwise warm air of summer. Could it be that the curse of the Basque Witches' Mountains was merely a product of folklore, passed down through generations, fueled by superstition and fear? Or was there something more to these stories, something that the people of Zugarramurdi and the surrounding regions truly believed, something that may still linger in the mountains today? There are those who suggest that the curse could be a metaphor for the trauma and injustice suffered by the people of the region. The witch hunts, with their brutality and senseless violence, left a deep scar in the collective memory of the Basque people. In this interpretation, the curse may be less about vengeful spirits and more about the deep, unresolved grief of a community that had been torn apart by fear and persecution. The mountains, it seems, became a place where the past could not be buried, where the echoes of those tortured and executed could still be heard in the wind. Yet there are other theories that lean toward more supernatural explanations. Some believe that the Basque witches did indeed tap into darker forces, and that these forces never truly left. Could the rituals performed in the caves of Zugarramurdi have opened a doorway to something otherworldly, a portal to realms that we cannot comprehend? Those who have ventured into the mountains, especially near the caves, often report a sense of unease, a strange sensation that they are not alone. Could these places still be haunted by the spirits of witches long past, or are they the result of residual energy left by those dark ceremonies? Could the curse, in a way, still be alive today? Some locals even claim that strange occurrences persist in the mountains, even in modern times. There are stories of hikers and travelers who have ventured into the forests and caves, only to become disoriented and lost, as if the mountains themselves were conspiring against them. Some have experienced feelings of dizziness. Others report seeing fleeting figures moving in the distance, figures that vanish when approached. Could these experiences be linked to the curse, or are they simply the product of the mind playing tricks in such an isolated and eerie place? Even in the 21st century, the legend of the Basque Witches' Mountains remains a deeply ingrained part of the local culture. The caves of Zugarramurdi have been turned into a museum, with exhibits that showcase the history of the witch trials and the dark rituals that once took place there. Tourists come from all over the world to visit these sacred sites, drawn by the allure of the mystery. But for some, the eerie atmosphere that still clings to the place is unsettling. The strange energy that some report feeling in the caves, the way the wind seems to carry whispers that fade before they can be understood. These are the lingering remnants of something that refuses to be forgotten. The curse of the Basque Witches' Mountains remains unresolved. Some say it is a legend, a tale spun from the fear and superstition of a bygone era. Others believe it is a warning, a reminder that certain forces, whether supernatural, psychological, or historical, can never be fully banished. And still, there are those who hear the whispers in the wind, who see the fleeting lights on the horizon, and who wonder if something truly does remain in those dark, haunted mountains. As we look upon the peaks of the Basque Mountains, the question lingers: what else might be hidden in the shadows? Could the curse of the Basque witches be more than just a tale? Or is it simply another story that time and nature have allowed to grow in the cracks of the human soul? The mountains stand silent, as they always have, keeping their secrets, secrets that may never be fully understood. In the labyrinth of medieval history, the story of the Knights of St. Thomas stands out like a shadow that never quite dissipates, lingering just beyond the reach of certainty. Their disappearance is one of the most perplexing mysteries of the Middle Ages, and like many such enigmas, it is wrapped in layers of myth, speculation, and half-remembered facts. But unlike the more famous orders, like the Knights Templar, the fate of the Knights of St. Thomas remains largely unknown, their legacy swallowed by time, leaving only traces that spark curiosity and invite unsettling questions. The Knights of St. Thomas, or Templars of St. Thomas, were a small but once powerful order, founded during the Crusades in the 12th century. Their mission was ostensibly to protect the pilgrims who journeyed to the Holy Land, particularly those traveling to the city of Jerusalem. But what set the Knights of St. Thomas apart from other knightly orders was their connection to a mysterious relic, one that would bind them to a fate shrouded in secrecy. The order's headquarters was located in the fortified city of Acre, on the coast of modern-day Palestine, an area that had witnessed some of the fiercest battles of the Crusades. From this position, the Knights became key players in the volatile geopolitics of the time, assisting the Crusader kingdoms in holding off Muslim forces. But despite their important role in these wars, the historical records about the Knights of St. Thomas are thin. The order's activities are rarely mentioned outside of a few references in the margins of Chronicles, and much of what we know is drawn from the accounts of their enemies or later historical speculations. One of the most curious aspects of their story is their purported connection to the relics of St. Thomas the Apostle. The knights were believed to guard a sacred object, often described as the Doubting Thomas relic, a relic said to hold divine power, possibly a piece of the apostle's remains or a precious artifact from the early Christian era. Some accounts suggest that the order's mission was to protect not just pilgrims, but to safeguard this object from falling into the wrong hands, particularly the Muslim forces who had long sought to possess such relics for themselves. It is unclear when the relic arrived in their possession or how the order came to be its guardians, but the knights' deep devotion to this object was undeniable. But what happened to them after the fall of Acre in 1291, when the Crusader kingdoms in the Holy Land were obliterated by Muslim forces under the leadership of Sultan Baybars? The fall of Acre marked the end of Christian rule in Palestine, and the disappearance of the Knights of St. Thomas is as sudden as it is baffling. Historians agree that the order simply vanished after the city fell. Some suggest that, in the chaos of the Crusader retreat, the knights were forced into hiding, their order scattered and dissolved. Yet, no one can explain why there are no detailed records of their final moments, nor any definitive proof of their disappearance. It is as if the knights, along with their relic, simply ceased to exist. What makes the story of the Knights of St. Thomas particularly unsettling is the absence of any conclusive evidence. Unlike other knightly orders, such as the Templars or the Hospitallers, the Knights of St. Thomas left behind no clear trail. Some believe that after the fall of Acre, they simply dissolved, their members assimilating into other orders or returning to their homelands. But this theory does little to explain why the order's relics, once believed to be of immeasurable value, were never seen again. There is a darker possibility, one suggested by a few cryptic references in later historical records, that the knights' disappearance was not the result of a simple dissolution, but rather a deliberate, calculated erasure. According to this theory, the knights and their relic were hidden, either by the surviving members of the order or by external forces who sought to keep the powerful artifact out of the wrong hands. Did the order, knowing the inevitable fall of Acre was upon them, choose to take their secret with them, leaving no trace of their actions? In the centuries following the fall of Acre, rumors circulated about the knights' fate. Some accounts claim that members of the order fled to other parts of Europe, where they lived out their days in secrecy, guarding the relic from afar. Other stories suggest that the knight's disappearance was part of a larger conspiracy to protect the object from being taken by the Islamic forces. Was the relic moved to safety, hidden away in a distant land, or was it lost to history forever? One of the more intriguing theories suggests that the relic, and with it the Knights of St. Thomas, may have had a role to play in the eventual emergence of the Freemasons. According to this speculation, surviving members of the order, or their descendants, joined with other secret societies that arose in the years after the Crusades. Did the knights, with their devotion to a sacred relic, pass on their traditions in secrecy, influencing the creation of later groups with their own hidden agendas? There are those who also point to the possibility of a deliberate cover-up, suggesting that powerful political or religious forces had a vested interest in erasing the Knights of St. Thomas from history. Did the Church, ever vigilant against rival factions and orders, seek to eliminate any trace of the order's influence? Could they have been erased from the historical record, their legacy concealed to prevent the spread of knowledge about their sacred mission? Another theory, more grounded in the strange occurrences that have dotted the history of Acre and its surroundings, suggests that something more supernatural was at play. Some claim that the knight's disappearance was not only a matter of political intrigue, but of divine intervention. Was there something about the relic itself, or the power it represented, that made it a target for forces beyond human comprehension? Could the knights have been tasked with a mission far greater than simply guarding a physical object, Perhaps they were involved in a larger cosmic struggle that led to their disappearance? As the centuries have passed, the truth about the Knights of St. Thomas has remained elusive. No direct evidence of their final days has ever been uncovered, and the relic they were believed to protect has never resurfaced. The Knights' disappearance has become a legend, a tale told by those who seek to understand how an order so integral to the Crusades could simply vanish without a trace. Was their disappearance a result of the inevitable decline of the Crusader kingdoms, or was it something more deliberate, something more mysterious? Standing among the ancient ruins of Acre today, it's difficult not to feel the weight of history pressing in. The city has long been reduced to crumbling walls and forgotten streets, but somewhere beneath these stones, perhaps, lies the answer to the fate of the Knights of St. Thomas. Could the relic they guarded, and with it their secrets, still be waiting to be uncovered? Or will the disappearance of the Knights of St. Thomas remain one of history's most unsettling and unanswerable questions? The mystery remains unsolved, and as with so many other vanished histories, the question lingers. What if the truth is still out there, hidden away, waiting to be found? Nestled on the outskirts of Cluj-Napoca, in the heart of Romania, lies a place that has captivated imaginations for centuries, a dense, mysterious forest, known to locals as the Hoia Baciu forest. Often described as the Bermuda Triangle of Romania, this patch of woodland is enveloped in an aura of intrigue and dread. Its twisted, gnarled trees stretch toward the sky like skeletal arms, their forms contorted and unnatural. Beneath the dense canopy, shadows seem to move of their own accord, and an eerie stillness pervades the air, as if the forest itself holds its breath. Hoia Baciu is a place where reality seems to bend, where unexplained phenomena occur with alarming frequency. But perhaps more unsettling than the stories and rumors surrounding the forest are the earliest accounts, those first whispers from centuries ago, when the forest's eerie reputation began to take shape. What transpired in these early years that led people to regard Hoia Baciu as a place where the boundary between the living and the supernatural became thin, if not entirely transparent? Historically, the forest has been a place of both refuge and fear for those who lived near it. According to early local legends, Hoia Baciu was considered a sacred space by the Dacians, the ancient people who once inhabited the area before the Roman Empire's expansion into what is now Romania. The dense forest, with its enigmatic aura, was thought to be a site where rituals were held to honor the gods or seek protection from malevolent forces. The people of the region, aware of the forest's mysterious energy, would approach it with caution, perhaps even reverence. But it wasn't long before more unsettling reports began to surface. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Hoia Baciu had gained a reputation as a place where strange and inexplicable events occurred. It was during this time that the earliest written accounts of unusual occurrences started to surface. One of the most persistent themes in these reports was the appearance of lights, flickering, otherworldly orbs that seemed to drift aimlessly through the forest, disappearing as quickly as they appeared. These lights, described as glowing spheres or will-o'-the-wisps, became one of the defining features of the forest's mystery. Were they natural phenomena, perhaps the result of swamp gases or other environmental factors? Or did they point to something far more inexplicable? The first major documented account of the forest's strange happenings came in 1968, when a military technician named Emil Barnea ventured into Hoia Baciu with a group of friends. As the story goes, Barnea, an experienced photographer, captured a photograph of the forest that would become infamous, a snapshot of a strange, unidentified object that appeared to be hovering in the sky. What made this account so compelling was not just the photograph, but the subsequent experiences of Barnea and his friends. They reported feeling an overwhelming sense of unease as they ventured deeper into the forest, as if something was watching them, following them from the shadows. Barnea himself claimed to have experienced a feeling of intense nausea and dizziness, while others in the group spoke of hearing whispers, faint voices that seemed to come from the trees themselves. As the years passed, more people came forward with similar accounts, each story adding to the mounting legend of the Hoia Baciu forest. Some reported seeing strange humanoid figures moving through the trees, figures that seemed to vanish when approached. Others spoke of experiencing time distortions, entering the forest and finding that hours had passed in what seemed like moments. Was the forest somehow altering their perception of reality? Or was it that the forest itself existed on a different plane of existence, one where the rules of time and space did not apply in the same way? Local folklore, too, began to weave its own narrative about the forest. Some stories told of a large, circular clearing in the heart of Hoia Baciu, where the trees appeared unnaturally symmetrical, as if arranged by some unseen force. Those who ventured into this clearing often reported a deep sense of foreboding, and it was said that the clearing was the site of strange rituals, perhaps even a gateway between the world of the living and the dead. Was it possible that the Dacians, or some other ancient culture, had known something that modern society had long forgotten? Could the forest, with its peculiar energy, still be acting as a kind of portal, a place where the veils between dimensions are thinnest? One of the most intriguing elements of Hoia Baciu's early accounts is the consistent theme of its unsettling effects on people's minds and bodies. There are numerous reports of those who have entered the forest experiencing intense emotional shifts, feelings of dread, anxiety, or even a profound sense of loss. Some claim to have seen glimpses of strange figures, ghostly apparitions, or phantom animals darting between the trees. Others have described the sensation of being lost, even in the most familiar parts of the forest, as if the terrain itself was shifting or changing without explanation. Could it be that something in the forest, whether it be an unknown natural phenomenon or something more paranormal, was causing these effects? Was the landscape somehow distorting people's perceptions, playing tricks on their minds? Or is it possible that the forest itself was somehow alive, reacting to the presence of humans in ways we are yet to fully understand? As the stories continued to accumulate, the legend of the forest grew. In the 1970s, the forest's reputation as a haunted location became cemented when an anthropologist, Dr. Alexandru Sift, conducted an extensive study of Hoia Baciu. Dr. Sift documented the strange occurrences he witnessed and recorded, including magnetic anomalies and strange radio interference in the area. According to his reports, compasses and other navigational instruments often malfunctioned when within the forest, as if the normal laws of physics were being bent or distorted. Could these anomalies provide some insight into the supernatural experiences reported by so many? Was there a scientific explanation for these magnetic disturbances, or was something far more mysterious at play? Over time, the forest became a focal point for paranormal investigators and thrill-seekers alike. But while many have ventured into Hoia Baciu looking for answers, the mystery remains elusive. The early accounts, particularly those from the late 19th and early 20th centuries, remain some of the most chilling and thought-provoking, providing tantalizing glimpses into the forest's strange nature. Yet, despite centuries of speculation, no one has ever fully explained the forest's bizarre phenomena, and the legends persist. What is it about Hoia Baciu that makes it so different from other forests? Could the forest's strange history be a result of a unique combination of natural elements? Or is there something far more inexplicable at work? And why does the forest continue to draw people in, year after year, despite the unsettling atmosphere that surrounds it? The early accounts may only be the beginning of a deeper mystery, one that remains unsolved, its answers perhaps hidden in the heart of the forest itself. As we stand on the edge of Hoia Baciu, with its twisted trees and foreboding silence, we are left to wonder what still lies in the shadows, just out of reach. The forest whispers its secrets, but it seems reluctant to reveal them. And perhaps, in this place where the boundaries between the known and the unknown are so thin, the answers are not meant to be discovered, at least not yet, not. In the deep, fog-enshrouded forests of south-central France, a shadow looms that has haunted the region for centuries. The Gévaudan province, now part of the Lozère department, is an area rich in both natural beauty and folklore, its dense woodlands and remote villages the setting for a mystery that has puzzled historians, cryptozoologists, and folklorists alike. This is the land of one of history's most terrifying and enduring legends, the Beast of Gévaudan. But before it became a national sensation in the 18th century, long before newspapers across France began to report on a rampaging creature that killed more than 100 people, there were whispers in the shadows of this land, rumors of a shape-shifting beast that had stalked these forests for generations. These proto-legends, which existed before the infamous wave of attacks that began in the 1760s, point to an even older mystery, one that is not easily explained by simple theories of rabid wolves or human malice. The Gévaudan region, with its rugged, mountainous terrain and dense forests, is the kind of place where secrets could easily be kept. The land is dotted with small hamlets, their residents living close to the earth and to ancient beliefs. For centuries, the forests were seen as a place of both refuge and danger, a place where the veil between the known and the unknown was thin, and where the line between the human and the supernatural could blur in the darkness of night. In the early days, before the reported attacks of the mid-18th century, there were stories told of strange creatures, beasts that moved with unnatural speed and cunning, that were not quite like any ordinary wolf, bear, or wild dog. One of the earliest references to the Beast of Gévaudan comes from the 16th century, when accounts speak of a large wolf-like creature that terrorized the local populace. These earlier accounts were not as specific as the later ones, but the descriptions shared certain similarities. A creature of immense size, often described as being larger than a normal wolf, with dark fur and a piercing, intelligent gaze. Some accounts describe it as having strange, glowing eyes that shone like lanterns in the night. It was said to have the ability to move in silence, stalking its prey in the shadows, and when it attacked, it did so with a speed and ferocity that seemed impossible for a creature of its size. But what makes these early accounts particularly intriguing is the suggestion that the Beast of Gévaudan was not simply a monstrous animal, but something more, a shape-shifting entity, capable of taking on different forms, or even possessing the ability to move between human and animal forms. The idea of shape-shifting creatures, or lycanthropy, was a common theme in European folklore, particularly in regions with deep pagan roots, like the forests of Gévaudan. Were these proto-legends merely exaggerated tales of wolves and bears, or were they early hints of something much darker and more mysterious? One of the most curious elements of these proto-legends is the repeated mention of a demon-like figure, often described as a beast that could change its appearance, sometimes blending in with ordinary animals or even appearing as a man. The people who encountered these early manifestations of the creature spoke of an overwhelming sense of dread, as though the beast was more than just an animal. In some accounts, it was described as having an almost supernatural ability to manipulate its environment, causing confusion among those who hunted it. It would disappear into the forests with alarming ease, and many who attempted to track it were said to become lost or to disappear themselves. By the time the terrifying rampage of the Beast of Gévaudan reached its peak in the 1760s, the creature was no longer a mere animal, but something far more sinister in the eyes of the people. Eyewitnesses reported seeing a massive creature, its body resembling that of a wolf, but its behavior far from ordinary. It stalked the land, preying on villagers and livestock alike, with some accounts describing it as having a human-like intelligence, able to anticipate the actions of hunters and villagers and evade capture. The beast seemed to have a malevolent presence, as if it were intentionally terrorizing the people, picking off victims one by one with chilling precision. It was during this time, particularly in 1764, that the descriptions of the creature began to take on even more bizarre and supernatural tones. While some still claimed that the beast was a rogue wolf or a pack of wolves, others insisted that it was something else entirely, an entity that defied explanation. One witness described the creature as having a strange aura, something that made it seem not quite real, as though it existed in a state between the physical world and some darker, more malevolent dimension. Such reports were accompanied by the belief that the creature was not simply an animal, but perhaps a cursed being, sent by dark forces to punish the people of Gévaudan. Many of these stories appear to be part of a larger, long-standing tradition of supernatural beings in the region. The people of Gévaudan had a long history of superstitions, deeply rooted in their connection to the land and the ancient, pre-Christian beliefs that lingered in the forest. They spoke of forest spirits, fairies, and shape-shifting creatures that roamed the woods, often connected to the ancient Celtic and Druidic traditions of the area. Could the beast of Gévaudan have been a manifestation of these older pagan beliefs, brought to life by fear and the collective imagination of the people? As the attacks escalated in the 1760s, the French authorities were forced to take action. A series of hunts, involving both local hunters and royal soldiers, were launched to track down and kill the beast. Despite these efforts, the creature continued to elude capture for years. In some accounts, hunters who had claimed to have killed the beast reported that its body had mysteriously disappeared after being shot. Others insisted that it was simply too large or too fast for any man to defeat. The legend grew, with more and more bizarre theories circulating about the creature's true nature. Some even began to suspect that the beast was not just one animal, but several, or that it had somehow been aided by dark forces. But even after the beast was killed in 1767, when a large wolf-like creature was shot by a royal hunter, though it was never definitively proven to be the same creature responsible for the attacks, the mystery persisted. Was the creature simply a rare, exceptionally large wolf, or was there something more to the tale of the beast of Gévaudan? Had the forest, with its deep shadows and its ancient magic, given birth to something that transcended natural explanation? And why did the creature seem so intent on terrorizing the people of this one small corner of France? The theories surrounding the beast of Gévaudan continue to be debated to this day. Some modern cryptozoologists suggest that the creature may have been a rare hybrid, or an unusually large wolf that had learned to avoid human contact, while others argue that the attacks were the work of several animals, possibly wolves, in a rare and tragic confluence. But what of the earlier legends, the proto-stories that speak of shape-shifting creatures and demonic entities? Were these simply early versions of the myth, distorted over time by fear and superstition? Or did they contain a kernel of truth, one that has been obscured by the passage of centuries? As we revisit the early accounts, we are left with more questions than answers. The legends of the beast of Gévaudan may have been born from the fear of something lurking just beyond the edge of human understanding, a creature that moved between worlds, both real and imagined. Today, the forests of Gévaudan stand quiet, but the shadows in the trees still seem to hold secrets that have not yet been fully revealed. Could the true nature of the beast of Gévaudan still be hidden within the foggy woods, waiting for someone brave enough or foolish enough to uncover its mysteries? The question remains: what if the beast of Gévaudan was not a creature from the animal kingdom at all, but something else? Something far more ancient and far more terrifying? The mystery continues to linger, a legend that refuses to fade into the past, its echoes still heard in the rustling of the leaves and the darkness of the forest. In the quiet rural town of Bungay, nestled in the heart of Suffolk, England, the ancient St. Mary's Church stands as a silent witness to the passage of time. Its weathered stone walls have seen centuries of history unfold, wars, plagues, and religious upheavals. But among the many stories that swirl around this church, there is one that has never fully been explained, one that continues to send a chill through the town and beyond. The tale of the Black Dogs of Bungay Church. The events surrounding these mysterious apparitions began on a Sunday in 1577, during a violent thunderstorm that swept through the region. As the storm raged outside, parishioners gathered within the church for their usual Sunday service, seeking solace and safety in the shadow of the ancient building. The skies outside were dark and filled with the ominous rumble of thunder, and the heavy rain lashed against the church's stone walls. But it was what happened inside the church that would forever alter its history. According to historical accounts, as the storm intensified, a strange and terrifying phenomenon occurred. A great clap of thunder, louder than any that had come before, shook the church to its foundations. It was at that moment that the first of the black dogs appeared. These were no ordinary dogs. They were described as large, black, and fierce, with glowing red eyes that seemed to pierce the darkness. The dogs were said to have entered the church through the door, their massive forms moving with supernatural speed. The size of the creatures alone seemed impossible to fathom, and the terror they invoked was instant. One parishioner, a man named John Stern, would later write in his account that the dogs ran at the people, as if they would devour them. Some said the creatures circled the pews, growling and snarling, their eyes fixed on the terrified congregation. Others described the dogs as moving with eerie precision, seemingly unaffected by the noise or the chaos of the storm, as if they existed in a realm outside of human understanding. And perhaps most disturbingly of all, these dogs appeared to have no physical form in the traditional sense. They were seen as spectral, as though they were made of shadows or smoke, their forms shifting in and out of existence. As quickly as they had appeared, the dogs vanished, disappearing without a trace into the storm. But the terror they left behind was not easily forgotten. In the aftermath of the incident, many of the parishioners spoke of feeling an overwhelming sense of dread, as though they had been in the presence of something malevolent, something beyond the natural world. Some claimed that the dogs had come as a warning, others as a harbinger of doom. But why were they there? And what had caused them to appear on that fateful day? The story of the Black Dogs of Bungay Church became a sensation, one that would ripple through the region and beyond. The sighting was reported in newspapers, and over time, various theories about the dogs began to emerge. Some, taking a more practical approach, suggested that the dogs were simply strays, large, feral animals that had found their way into the church during the storm. But this explanation did little to account for the eerie, otherworldly behavior of the creatures, or the terror they inspired in those who saw them. Others turned to the supernatural. The Black Dog, or Black Shuck, was a well-known figure in English folklore, an omen of death, a creature associated with bad luck and misfortune. The appearance of such a creature, particularly in a church, was seen by some as a sign of impending disaster. Perhaps it was a warning of the plague, which had ravaged the country in the years before the event. Or was it a punishment for the sins of the parishioners, sent by an unseen force to remind them of their mortality? There were even those who claimed the appearance of the black dogs was tied to ancient pagan rituals, remnants of a time when the land was thought to be imbued with the power of spirits and deities. In this view, the dogs were not mere animals, but physical manifestations of ancient forces that had been awakened by the storm, perhaps even drawn to the church because of its sacred nature. The dog's behavior, it was said, was a reflection of the spiritual conflict that lay beneath the surface of the natural world. Some more modern theories have sought to find a psychological or atmospheric explanation for the phenomenon. Could the storm itself have caused a form of mass hysteria among the parishioners? The terror felt by the congregation could have been exacerbated by the violence of the storm, the sudden darkness, and the fear of the unknown. In such a charged atmosphere, it is possible that the mind played tricks on the people, causing them to perceive a terrifying supernatural event that did not actually occur in the physical world. This theory, however, fails to explain why so many witnesses consistently described the same strange creatures, and why the terror they experienced felt so palpable. One of the most compelling aspects of the Bungay church sightings is the recurring motif of the black dog itself. The legend of the black dog, known across Britain and parts of Europe, is as old as the land itself. Throughout history, these spectral hounds have appeared in tales of death and misfortune, often linked to supernatural or demonic forces. They have been described as harbingers of death, appearing before the death of an individual or the destruction of a community. In some stories, the black dog is said to be the spirit of a lost soul, bound to roam the earth in an eternal search for redemption or release. Is it possible that the black dogs of Bungay were part of this ancient mythos, an incarnation of the dark forces that have always lurked at the edges of human consciousness? Or were they something entirely different, perhaps a manifestation of collective fear, or a dark memory of something that occurred long before recorded history? Interestingly, the black dogs of Bungay are not the only spectral creatures to be linked with churches in England. There have been other reports of similar sightings, often in locations steeped in religious significance, where the boundary between the material world and the spiritual realm feels especially thin. These creatures, large, ominous, and often described as appearing without warning, have become synonymous with the darker side of folklore, a reminder that even in sacred spaces, there may be forces beyond human comprehension. Even today, the legend of the black dogs continues to captivate those who seek the unexplained. The stories are passed down, retold in hushed tones by locals, and examined by paranormal investigators who continue to search for answers. Every year, visitors to Bungay Church seek out the site of the encounter, hoping to catch a glimpse of the shadowy beasts that once terrorized the town. But even as modern science offers new ways to analyze the events, the mystery persists, leaving us to wonder whether the black dogs of Bungay Church were truly spectral manifestations, or simply reflections of something far darker buried within the human psyche. What might these creatures have represented to the people who saw them? Were they harbingers of doom, or mere figments of an anxious, storm-ridden mind? And why, after all these centuries, does their story still haunt us? As we stand in the stillness of the church, the answer remains elusive, buried in the storm's long-forgotten thunder. For the black dogs of Bungay, the question remains: were they real, or were they simply a shadow of something far more ancient and far more mysterious than we can understand? In the dense, untamed jungles of northern Cambodia, amidst the roots of towering trees and shrouded in thick, humid air, lies the once great city of Koh Ker. Hidden for centuries, this enigmatic archaeological site was once the capital of the Khmer Empire, a thriving city crowned by colossal temples and sprawling stone monuments. Now, it is an eerie ruin, largely forgotten by time, yet its history remains as dark and unsettling as the jungle that has swallowed it whole. The city of Koh Ker, located some 120 kilometers from the modern city of Siem Reap, was built by the Khmer king Jayavarman IV in the 10th century. For a brief period, it served as the heart of a powerful empire, a place where kings were revered and temples dedicated to gods were constructed with immense precision and grandeur. At its peak, Koh Ker boasted over 70 temples, shrines, and pyramidal structures, including the towering Prasat Tom, a stepped pyramid that still stands as one of the most impressive remnants of the site. The stone blocks that make up these structures are massive, some weighing several tons, carefully cut and intricately laid, an achievement of both craftsmanship and ambition. But despite its once great splendor, Koh Ker is also steeped in a tale of treachery, betrayal, and divine retribution, which gives rise to one of the most chilling aspects of its history, the so-called Curse of the Koh Ker Kings. The origins of this curse are obscured by time, but it is said to have been woven into the very fabric of the city's foundation. As the story goes, the king who built Koh Ker, Jayavarman IV, was not the rightful heir to the throne. His ascension to power was a violent and bloody affair, marked by the betrayal and assassination of his predecessor, his cousin, and his own family members. Jayavarman IV's rise was swift, but not without consequence. The Khmer people, who had long revered their kings as divinely appointed, were uneasy with Jayavarman's violent actions. It is said that as he took the throne, the kingdom itself was cursed, doomed to fall under a shadow of bad luck, misfortune, and even death. The curse, however, was not confined to the political intrigues of the court. It seemed to seep into the very stones of Koh Ker itself, as though the land itself was haunted by the bloodshed that had paved the way for its construction. Some believe that the curse was invoked by the gods, angered by the regicide that allowed Jayavarman IV to seize the throne. Others argue that it was the wrath of those who perished in the bloodbath, their souls unable to rest as long as the city stood in their name. The most striking evidence of this curse comes from the series of strange and tragic events that befell those associated with the city of Koh Ker. It is said that the building of Koh Ker was plagued with inexplicable misfortunes from the very beginning. Workers reportedly suffered from sudden, mysterious illnesses, and many died during the construction. Some claimed that the ground itself seemed to reject the city, as though the earth had turned against those who sought to build upon it. Some even whispered that the workers had disturbed an ancient site sacred to the gods, unknowingly angering the spirits of the land. As the years passed, the curse seemed to take root, not just in the city's builders, but in its rulers as well. Jayavarman IV ruled for a mere 18 years before his death, and while it was officially recorded as a natural death, rumors abounded that his reign was cut short by some unseen force, perhaps the wrath of the gods he had angered. After his death, the throne passed to his son, Rajendra Varman II, who sought to bring peace and stability to Koh Ker. Yet his reign was short-lived and plagued by disasters. Temples and statues were said to fall, lightning storms and floods struck the region with alarming regularity, and even the royal family seemed to be haunted by premature deaths. Some historians suggest that the political instability and growing unrest within the kingdom contributed to these calamities, but the eerie coincidence of these events happening in rapid succession suggests that the curse may have had more to do with the city's blood-soaked foundation than mere happenstance. By the end of the 10th century, Koh Ker had been abandoned, its temples and structures left to decay and fall into ruin. The city's once glorious monuments, now overtaken by the dense jungle, became a symbol of the Khmer Empire's fragility, of a kingdom that had risen to power through blood and violence only to collapse under the weight of its own ambition and divine wrath. But the true legacy of Koh Ker's curse may have been its abandonment, an eerie silence that enveloped the site, as if the very land itself refused to allow anything to prosper within its boundaries. The jungle swallowed Koh Ker whole, and for centuries it remained forgotten, lost to time and obscurity until its rediscovery in the early 20th century. In more recent years, there have been several reports from those who have ventured into the jungles surrounding Koh Ker, archaeologists, treasure hunters, and locals, of strange, unexplainable phenomena. Some claim to have heard the faint sounds of chanting or the distant ringing of bells in the night, even though no people have lived in the area for centuries. Others have reported sudden, overwhelming feelings of dread, as if something unseen is watching them from the shadows. There are accounts of expeditions to Koh Ker, where members of the team have mysteriously fallen ill or disappeared without a trace. One archaeologist even described feeling as though his body was being weighed down by an invisible force while working in the ruins. Such reports have led some to speculate that the curse of the Koh Ker Kings might not be merely a matter of historical folklore, but something more tangible, an ancient energy or malevolent force that has been left behind in the wake of the bloodshed and treachery that marked the city's construction. Some suggest that the curse may have been linked to the specific materials used in the construction of the temples, particularly the stones, which were said to have been quarried from sacred sites, adding to the belief that the land itself had been defiled by the actions of Jayavarman IV and his dynasty. Could the curse of Koh Ker be the result of supernatural forces, an ancient retribution enacted by the gods themselves? Or could it be a psychological manifestation, a product of the history and the legends that have grown around the site over the centuries? In either case, the legacy of the Koh Ker Kings remains unsettling. As the jungle continues to reclaim the city, one cannot help but wonder what secrets lie buried beneath the roots of the trees, and whether the curse of Koh Ker still lingers, waiting to be uncovered. What, if anything, lies hidden in the ruins of Koh Ker? Is it merely the remnants of a once great empire, now lost to time, or something far more ominous, a dark legacy that refuses to fade into history? The mystery of the curse of the Koh Ker Kings remains unsolved, its shadow stretching across the centuries, urging us to question how deeply the past can reach into the present, and whether some curses are meant to be forgotten or remembered. In the quiet countryside of East Yorkshire, England, nestled among the mist-shrouded hills and ancient woodlands, lies Burton Agnes Hall, a stately 16th-century manor house surrounded by centuries of history. Its graceful stone facade and manicured grounds evoke a sense of timeless elegance. But beneath this serene exterior, the hall harbors a story so unsettling that it has haunted the estate for generations. At the heart of the mystery lies an object as strange as it is chilling: the screaming skull of Lady Dorothy, one of the hall's former inhabitants. The tale of the screaming skull begins in the early 17th century, when Burton Agnes Hall was the home of the Agnes family, a wealthy and influential line that had lived in the area for centuries. Among the family was Lady Dorothy, the daughter of Sir Henry Agnes. Her story, like that of many historical figures, was shaped by the turbulence of her time. But it is her tragic death and the strange events surrounding her final wishes that would forever tether her name to the haunting of Burton Agnes Hall. Lady Dorothy Agnes was a young woman of great beauty and intelligence. Her life, however, was marked by an early and untimely death. According to the legend, Lady Dorothy fell gravely ill while still in her 20s. Her condition worsened rapidly, and as the end drew near, she reportedly made a final, chilling request to her family. On her deathbed, she asked that her skull be removed after her passing and kept in the hall to rest in a special place within the manor. It is said that Lady Dorothy's last words were, "Bury me not until you hear me scream." Whether her words were born of superstition, a deep-seated fear of death, or an unshakable connection to the estate she loved, no one can say for certain. But the request was carried out. Upon her death, Lady Dorothy's skull was removed from her body and preserved. It was placed in a wooden box and kept inside the hall, with the promise that it would be returned to the grave at some point in the future. The first unsettling events surrounding the skull began soon after. The family, perhaps hoping to honor Lady Dorothy's wishes, left the skull within the walls of Burton Agnes Hall. It wasn't long before inexplicable occurrences began to take place. Servants and guests alike reported hearing strange sounds echoing through the halls, sounds that some described as screams, others as wails of sorrow. These cries were particularly noticeable in the dead of night, when the house was at its most still, and yet no source could be found. The wailing was faint but persistent, and it seemed to emanate from a specific area of the house, near the room where Lady Dorothy's skull was kept. At first, it was assumed to be nothing more than an unsettling draft or the creaking of an old house. But as the days turned into weeks and the cries persisted, they became impossible to ignore. No one could explain them. The presence of the skull seemed to intensify the strange noises, as though it were somehow connected to the haunting sounds that filled the manor. Eventually, it became clear that the screaming was not just an auditory illusion. It was a force that seemed to manifest in a tangible way. Then, as the legend goes, tragedy struck. The skull was moved, perhaps out of fear or skepticism, and placed under the care of a local priest, who was asked to rid it of its curse. But when the priest attempted to dispose of the skull, an even more terrifying event occurred. As he prepared to bury the skull, it is said that he was suddenly overcome by a deep sense of dread and unease. The priest, reportedly a man of great faith, could not bring himself to carry out the task. According to some versions of the story, the priest began to hear the wailing sounds emanating from the skull once again. A chill ran through him, and, overcome with a sense of impending doom, he fled from the house in terror, leaving the skull where it was. It is at this point that the screaming skull of Burton Agnes Hall became an object of legend, tied forever to the haunting atmosphere of the estate. Over the years, the skull would remain hidden in the hall, concealed from the public, as family members and caretakers tried to suppress its disturbing legacy. Yet, no matter how hard they tried, the skull's presence seemed to influence the estate in strange ways. Visitors to the hall continued to report the sound of distant, eerie screams echoing through the walls, often with no clear origin. Those who knew the story would sometimes feel a creeping sensation of unease, as though something were watching from the shadows. But the mystery deepened. In time, the skull was reportedly placed in a glass case for display, an odd preservation of the past, yet no less unsettling. And for many, it became clear that this wasn't simply a story of a supernatural relic, but of an object imbued with a deep, unrelenting energy, an energy that seemed both malevolent and mournful. Visitors began to speculate whether Lady Dorothy's restless spirit truly lived within the skull, or if her tragic death had left an indelible mark on the manor itself. Was her request a genuine wish, or a final plea for vengeance or release from some unspoken torment? Over the centuries, the events surrounding the screaming skull have attracted the interest of countless historians, paranormal investigators, and tourists. Some claim to have heard the screams themselves, faint but unmistakable. Others suggest the phenomenon may be related to the acoustics of the hall, the way sound carries in old stone buildings. Could it be that the peculiar construction of the hall amplifies certain sounds, creating the illusion of distant wails? Skeptics have proposed more rational explanations, such as the presence of underground rivers or hidden chambers that might cause unusual noises during storms or shifts in the earth. Yet these explanations often fail to fully satisfy those who have felt the unmistakable sense of something otherworldly in the air. Theories have even emerged around the skull's possible role in the supernatural history of Burton Agnes Hall. Some speculate that it is cursed, a relic that draws on the power of Lady Dorothy's death to maintain an eerie, supernatural hold over the estate. Others believe that the skull is not cursed in the traditional sense but represents something darker, a link to an earlier, more pagan past, when the bones of ancestors were thought to hold power and influence. Perhaps most unsettling of all is the fact that, for all the investigations and historical research, no one truly knows the full truth of what happened to Lady Dorothy or the origins of the skull's power. The family that once owned Burton Agnes Hall is long gone, and much of the original documentation regarding the skull's history has been lost to time. What remains are only the whispered accounts of those who lived with the skull and the strange, lingering effects it had on the estate. As Burton Agnes Hall continues to draw visitors, the mystery of the screaming skull remains unresolved, and with each retelling, the legend grows more enigmatic. Was Lady Dorothy truly trying to send a message from beyond the grave? Or is the curse simply a tale spun from the fear and imagination of those who came after her? And why, after centuries of unsettling occurrences, does the skull's eerie presence still linger in the collective memory of all who encounter it? The true origin of the screaming skull of Burton Agnes Hall remains a mystery, its wailing echoes reverberating through the halls of history, unanswered and unresolved. The question remains, what, if anything, lies beneath the surface of this haunting object? What secrets does it still guard, and what restless energy does it contain? Tucked away in the undulating hills of the Yorkshire wolds, far from the bustling towns and villages of modern England, lies the ghostly, half-forgotten village of Wharram, Percy. It is a place where time seems to stand still, as if the very earth holds its breath in the presence of something that should have long been forgotten. Today, all that remains are the weathered outlines of stone buildings, the crumbling remnants of walls that once housed families, and the faint outlines of a forgotten path that meanders through the desolate field. Yet, there is more to Wharram, Percy than its ruinous appearance. This lost village, once home to a thriving medieval community, carries with it a mystery that has haunted historians and archaeologists for centuries. Why did it vanish so suddenly? The village of Wharram, Percy dates back to at least the 11th century, during a time when England was just beginning to emerge from the chaotic aftermath of the Norman conquest. The village was part of the Percy family's vast estates, and its residents lived as part of a well-established rural community. For centuries, life in Wharram, Percy was typical of many English villages, a patchwork of small holdings, fields, and farms nestled within a pastoral landscape. Its inhabitants grew crops, raised livestock, and formed a tight-knit community centered around their small church, St. Martin's. At its peak, Wharram, Percy was not a small, isolated hamlet, but a thriving settlement. The village boasted a church, several large manor houses, and a handful of outlying cottages. There were barns and workshops, a marketplace, and a busy farming economy. The village's position, along the ancient trackways that connected the wolds to the coast, made it an ideal location for trade and communication. It was, in many ways, a thriving microcosm of rural life in medieval England, and yet, by the 16th century, Wharram, Percy was abandoned. Its inhabitants disappeared almost overnight, leaving behind an eerie ghost town of empty stone structures and overgrown fields. No bodies, no remains, no significant signs of violence were left behind. Just silence. The first recorded mention of Wharram, Percy's abandonment comes from the early 1500s, when local records indicate that the once bustling village had become entirely deserted. But the real mystery begins with the question that still lingers today. What happened to the people of Wharram, Percy? For generations, historians have proposed various theories to explain the vanishing of the village. The most straightforward explanation points to the economic shifts that took place in England during the late medieval period. The process of enclosure, which saw common lands being converted into private, enclosed fields for the burgeoning sheep industry, led to the depopulation of many rural villages across England. Wharram, Percy, being primarily an agricultural community, would not have been immune to these changes. With the rise of larger, more profitable sheep farms, smaller, less efficient villages like Wharram, Percy were left to fall into disrepair. But despite this plausible explanation, there are still elements of Wharram, Percy's disappearance that do not quite add up. The village was located in an area where sheep farming did not take root until much later, and it had enough arable land to sustain its residents even during economic hardship. Furthermore, the village had been an established community for centuries. It is unlikely that it would have been completely abandoned without any warning or record of hardship. In fact, many villages during this time, even if they were economically troubled, continued to exist, albeit in a more diminished form. Wharram Percy was not the only village in the area, and there was little to suggest a dire need for its complete abandonment. Why, then, did it vanish so suddenly? One of the more unsettling theories regarding the disappearance of Wharram Percy is linked to the village's proximity to ancient pagan sites. Some researchers believe that the site of Wharram Percy was built upon a sacred or ritualistic location, perhaps one tied to a much older, pre-Christian belief system. Could the inhabitants have been driven away by supernatural forces, or by the power of lingering, ancient curses? According to local folklore, the land surrounding Wharram Percy has always been considered haunted, and strange occurrences are said to have been reported over the years. Visitors to the site have claimed to feel an inexplicable unease, as if the land itself holds secrets it does not want to reveal. There is also speculation that Wharram Percy's disappearance may be tied to disease. The Black Death, which ravaged Europe in the mid-14th century, left a trail of devastation across England, wiping out entire villages. Some suggest that Wharram Percy may have suffered a particularly brutal outbreak of the plague, which could have led to the rapid abandonment of the village. While this is certainly a plausible explanation, given the high mortality rate during the plague years, it does not fully account for the fact that the village's church and key structures seem to have been left standing for some time after the initial disappearance. No mass graves have been found, and there are no records of an epidemic of sufficient scale to explain such an abrupt departure. Adding another layer of intrigue is the possibility that Wharram Percy's abandonment was connected to the turbulence of the English Reformation. During this time, there was considerable upheaval in rural communities, as monasteries were dissolved and the religious landscape of England shifted dramatically. The village's proximity to religious sites and its historical association with the Percy family could have meant that it was caught up in the political and religious upheaval of the period. Did the people of Wharram Percy flee in fear of persecution, or were they forced out by external pressures? Some theories suggest that they might have been driven away by the rising power of the Tudor monarchy, which was keen on consolidating its control over the countryside. Then, of course, there are the more fringe theories, the ones that continue to stir the imaginations of those who visit the site, hoping to uncover some lost fragment of history. Some suggest that Wharram Percy was abandoned due to the influence of something supernatural, an ancient evil, a curse, or the malevolent force of some long-dead entity. There are whispers of strange events taking place in the vicinity of the village long after its inhabitants had disappeared. Local legends talk of mysterious lights in the sky, of figures seen roaming the ruins after dark, and of inexplicable sounds emanating from the earth itself. Could there be a darker, more sinister explanation for Wharram Percy's sudden disappearance? Something that transcends the ordinary, something that cannot be easily explained away? And yet, despite all the theories and speculations, the disappearance of Wharram Percy remains unresolved. It is a mystery that has persisted for centuries, one that continues to captivate the imagination of historians, archaeologists, and visitors to the site. Wharram Percy stands as a reminder of the fragility of human settlements, the impermanence of history, and the quiet secrets that linger in the landscape. The stone buildings, the foundations of long-lost homes, and the quiet, lonely fields, these are the only witnesses to a past that is now lost to time. The village's sudden and unexplained vanishing leaves us to wonder, was it the result of a natural disaster, economic hardship, or something far more unsettling? Could the people of Wharram Percy have left willingly, or were they driven away by forces beyond their understanding? Or perhaps, is there something darker at work, something that has yet to reveal itself, hidden in the forgotten corners of the Yorkshire wolds. In the year 1237, nestled in the rolling hills of medieval Germany, the small town of Kölbigk was plunged into an unfathomable chaos that would baffle historians for centuries. The streets, typically lined with humble wooden homes and cobblestone paths, became the scene of an eerie and inexplicable event. A strange epidemic, unlike any other, swept through the population, an outbreak that would become known as the Dancing Plague of Kölbigk. The tale begins in the warmth of late spring, when the people of Kölbigk, much like their counterparts in towns and villages across medieval Europe, lived under the weight of constant struggle. The period was one of war, plague, and superstition, where religious fervor, fear of the unknown, and the harsh realities of life were often intertwined. For the townspeople of Kölbigk, however, nothing could prepare them for what would unfold in their quiet town, which would soon be marked by a phenomenon so bizarre and disturbing that it remains one of history's most enigmatic episodes. It started, as many strange events often do, with a single individual, a young woman, perhaps no older than 20, who suddenly began to twitch and jerk uncontrollably in the middle of the town square. At first, the onlookers thought it a mere fit, something commonplace in an era where knowledge of medicine and the body was limited. But as minutes turned into hours, and the woman continued to move erratically, shaking her limbs and contorting her body in ways that seemed unnatural, the curiosity of the townspeople shifted to concern. But this was only the beginning. Soon, others began to join her. One by one, individuals from across the town found themselves similarly overcome. Some collapsed in fits of spasms, while others seemed to fall into a strange trance, their bodies moving rhythmically, as though they were dancing to some unseen tune. Some described the movements as wild and uncontrollable, with dancers' faces contorted in expressions of terror or delirium. These dancers seemed to lose themselves entirely, not only in the act of moving but in the violent, unrelenting drive to continue dancing. Days passed, and still the strange epidemic spread, with more and more townspeople falling prey to this uncontrollable force. Within days, the epidemic had engulfed the entire village. At its height, more than 100 people were seized by the compulsion to dance. There were no particular patterns to who was affected. Men, women, children, all found themselves inexplicably swept up in the terrifying phenomenon. Witnesses reported that those affected danced with great speed, their feet pounding the ground as they staggered through the streets, showing no signs of stopping, even when exhaustion or injury should have halted their movements. And it wasn't just the dance itself that was disturbing. The symptoms of this strange plague were often accompanied by other signs of distress. Some dancers screamed in agony, while others were said to have foamed at the mouth or rolled their eyes as if in a trance. Those who could manage to speak were often incoherent, muttering in strange tongues or speaking of visions that made little sense. The doctors of Kölbigk were powerless to stop the strange affliction, and priests were called upon to bless the afflicted, invoking prayers and rituals in an attempt to exorcise whatever demon had taken hold of the village. But nothing worked. Weeks passed, and the situation in Kölbigk grew increasingly dire. As the days dragged on, those still caught in the grip of the dancing plague began to collapse from exhaustion. Many died from sheer physical strain, their bodies overwhelmed by the frenetic movements that seemed to defy all reason. Those who survived were often left debilitated, their health shattered by the experience. Yet, the cause of this terrifying event was as elusive as ever. The villagers, desperate for answers, turned to their religious leaders, who were quick to offer explanations rooted in the supernatural. Some claimed that the dancers had been possessed by demons. Others suggested that they had angered the gods or had fallen victim to an ancient curse. But for all the hysteria and religious fervor, the true cause of the plague remained hidden. How could an entire village, seemingly healthy and normal just days before, suddenly fall victim to such an affliction? Was it a curse, a punishment, or something even more mysterious? As time passed, the dancing plague slowly subsided, but the questions surrounding it did not. Was this a case of mass hysteria, or was something else at work? Today, the dancing plague of Kölbigk remains one of the most perplexing mysteries in history. While similar episodes of dancing mania, known as the dancing plague or dancing mania of the Middle Ages, have been documented in other parts of Europe, the specific circumstances of Kölbigk's outbreak continue to baffle researchers. One of the more accepted explanations for these outbreaks points to the phenomenon of mass hysteria. In times of extreme stress and hardship, such as the medieval period, large groups of people can sometimes experience psychological contagion, where they collectively lose control over their bodies in response to shared anxiety or fear. This might explain the collective movement and trance-like state that the dancers appeared to experience. However, this theory leaves many questions unanswered. Why did this happen? What triggered it in Kölbigk specifically? Another possibility often discussed by historians and medical experts is the potential involvement of ergot poisoning. Ergot is a hallucinogenic mold that grows on rye, a staple crop in medieval Europe. When consumed accidentally through contaminated bread or grain, ergot can induce powerful hallucinations, convulsions, and erratic behavior, symptoms that would not seem out of place in the descriptions of the dancing plague. Could the villagers of Kölbigk have eaten tainted bread, leading to a mass intoxication? While ergot poisoning has been linked to other dancing mania outbreaks, no definitive evidence has ever been found to prove it as the cause in Kölbigk. Other theories suggest that the plague was the result of a collective psychological response to trauma or religious fervor. The 13th century was a period of great uncertainty. Plague, famine, and war were rampant, and the people of Kölbigk may have been living in a state of constant fear and anxiety. Could the sheer weight of their suffering have triggered an outbreak of mass hysteria? Could their deep-rooted religious beliefs have caused them to interpret their symptoms as a divine test or possession? There are, of course, the more fringe theories. Some suggest that the event was caused by an ancient, mystical ritual, one that somehow got out of control. Others propose more speculative explanations, such as the influence of extraterrestrial forces or even time anomalies, ideas that push the boundaries of the conventional but still capture the imagination of those drawn to the inexplicable. The haunting image of a village gripped by an uncontrollable, mysterious force has endured for centuries. The events in Kölbigk may have faded into the annals of history, but the mystery they present has never truly been solved. Could it have been the result of psychological pressure, toxic substances, or something far more inexplicable? And if such an event could happen in the quiet, sleepy village of Kölbigk, what other mysteries might lie buried in history, waiting to be uncovered? As we ponder these questions, we are left to wonder, what truly happened in Kölbigk that fateful spring of 1237? And could there be, somewhere in the dark corners of history, more mysteries still waiting to be revealed? The fog rolls thick across the dark, forbidding waters of the Baltic Sea, where the islands of Sweden, Denmark, and Germany converge in a treacherous landscape dotted with shipwrecks, hidden reefs, and the ruins of forgotten empires. At first glance, this region might appear tranquil, with its low-lying hills and dense forests. But beneath the surface, there is a story that has haunted the Baltic for centuries, one tied to an ancient battle, a vanished fleet, and the eerie sightings of spectral warriors that still echo across the waters. It is here, in the heart of the Baltic Sea, that the legend of the ghost army of Svolder was born, a haunting tale that has lingered in the collective memory of Scandinavia. For centuries, sailors, fishermen, and locals have reported sightings of a mysterious fleet, a ghostly armada that drifts silently across the waters of the Svolder Strait, a narrow passage that separates the islands of Gotland and Åland. According to those who have witnessed the phenomenon, this fleet is no ordinary collection of ships. These are the spectral remnants of an ancient naval battle fought in the year 1000 AD between the forces of King Olaf Tryggvason of Norway and a coalition of Swedish and Danish rulers. The battle, known as the Battle of Svolder, ended in a crushing defeat for Olaf, and with it, the disappearance of the king and his fleet, an event that would go on to leave its mark on history, as well as the mysterious sightings that continue to this day. At its core, the Battle of Svolder is a story of betrayal, ambition, and the shifting tides of power. Olaf Tryggvason, a famed Viking king known for his ruthless campaigns to spread Christianity throughout Scandinavia, had established himself as a powerful force in the north. But in the year 1000, he found himself facing a coalition of enemies: King Sweyn Forkbeard of Denmark, King Olaf I of Sweden, and a few others. They ambushed Olaf's fleet in the Svolder Strait, and despite his valiant efforts, Olaf's forces were overwhelmed. The battle was catastrophic. The king's ship was said to have been sunk, and Olaf himself vanished, never to be seen again. With Olaf's death, his dream of a unified Scandinavia crumbled. But in the years that followed, a strange legacy took root in the waters where his fleet fell. Fishermen began to report strange sightings in the early morning hours. Sailing ships that appeared out of the mist, their sails tattered and their crews seemingly invisible. These spectral ships would drift across the horizon, only to vanish before they could be properly identified. The sightings were most frequent in the autumn months, when the fog would blanket the sea, creating an otherworldly atmosphere. Over time, the local population began to associate these mysterious apparitions with the Battle of Svolder. The theory that Olaf's defeated fleet and the spirits of the warriors who perished with him had returned to haunt the waters became the dominant explanation. In some accounts, the ghostly ships would appear with an eerie glow, their outlines barely visible, drifting aimlessly as if searching for something. Other reports spoke of a low, mournful sound, akin to the wailing of warriors lost to time, carried on the wind. Occasionally, those who dared venture close enough would report hearing the faint sounds of battle, clashing swords, the creaking of ships, and the agonizing cries of men caught in the throes of death. But was it merely the fevered imagination of sailors who had been out at sea for too long, or was there something more to these stories? In the centuries since, the sightings of the ghost army of Svolder have continued, albeit with less frequency. Yet, they persist. In 1940, a Swedish fisherman claimed to have seen a massive fleet, cloaked in mist, drifting slowly toward the shore before disappearing as swiftly as it had come. In more recent years, tourists visiting the region have reported strange phenomena on the water, silhouettes of ships materializing out of the fog, only to vanish when approached. A few have even claimed to have heard faint voices carried across the waves, speaking in an ancient tongue. The most unsettling aspect of these accounts is the consistency with which they occur. Despite the passage of time, these sightings remain largely unchanged, suggesting that something mysterious and unexplainable is at play. Historians and archaeologists have long dismissed the ghostly fleet as a product of folklore, attributing the sightings to a combination of natural phenomena, such as the dense fogs and peculiar light patterns of the region. The idea that the Battle of Svolder's outcome could have created a supernatural imprint on the landscape is seen as little more than a romantic tale, a way to explain a tragedy in the context of a long-forgotten era. Some have speculated that the sighting of ghostly ships could be attributed to reflections of modern vessels on the water, or the optical illusion created by shifting light on the horizon. These explanations, though rational, fail to explain the strange consistency and emotional weight of the sightings reported by witnesses, many of whom have no prior knowledge of the battle itself. Others, however, have proposed more fringe theories. Could it be that the spirits of the fallen warriors are trapped in some kind of liminal space, doomed to replay the events of their final moments for eternity? Is it possible that the very waters where Olaf Tryggvason met his end possess a kind of residual energy, an imprint of the violent emotions and chaos that unfolded during the battle? Some have suggested that the battle itself may have been more than just a clash of armies, but a significant event tied to powerful forces beyond the mortal realm. Was the defeat of Olaf a spiritual crisis as well as a military one? Could the forces of the gods themselves have become involved, ensuring that the memory of this battle would never truly fade? There are also those who wonder whether the sightings are not merely a product of the past, but a warning from history itself. Could the appearance of the ghost army be a sign that unresolved conflicts from the Viking Age are still reverberating through time, like echoes that cannot be silenced? Some theorists even suggest that these phantom ships could be related to an ancient curse, perhaps one tied to Olaf's fateful decision to spread Christianity throughout the pagan lands of Scandinavia. Did his ambition anger the gods or the ancient spirits of the land, leaving a lasting imprint on the very waters where his fleet fell? As with most mysteries, the truth remains elusive. The sightings of the ghost army of Svolder continue to haunt the Svolder Strait, leaving us to ponder the reasons behind these strange apparitions. Are they simply a product of history and superstition, or is there something more at work, something that transcends our understanding of the natural world? The waters of the Baltic Sea hold many secrets, and as long as the mist continues to rise from the depths, the tale of the ghost army will remain one of the most enduring enigmas of Scandinavia. Perhaps then, the real mystery lies not in the answers we seek, but in the questions that persist. What is it that draws us to these ancient legends, to the idea that the past can still reach out to us, even from beyond the grave? And, as we continue to search for answers, we must ask ourselves, what exactly are we hoping to find in the spectral waters of Svolder? The town of Loudun, nestled in the rolling hills of western France, might appear to be a quaint, almost idyllic place to the casual observer. Its cobbled streets, medieval buildings, and towering church spires seem to tell the story of a peaceful village, untouched by the turmoil and fear that often accompany more urbanized centers of history. However, beneath the surface of this serene French landscape lies one of the darkest chapters of spiritual and psychological turmoil, one that would reverberate through the annals of both religious history and psychological investigation. The story that unfolded here, centuries ago, was one of madness, fear, and supernatural dread, an early precursor to some of the most well-known cases of demonic possession in history. It was in the early 17th century, specifically during the years 1630 to 1634, that Loudun became infamous for its bizarre and terrifying series of events, which would later be termed the Loudun possessions. This story, however, is not just about the dramatic and harrowing episodes of alleged demonic activity that haunted the convent of the Ursuline nuns. It is also a precursor to the events of later, more famous possessions, such as the 1949 case of Roland Doe, widely believed to have inspired The Exorcist, as well as the larger moral and cultural climate of Europe during this time, where witchcraft, heresy, and the supernatural were often at the forefront of society's collective anxieties. To understand the significance of the Loudun possessions, one must first familiarize themselves with the town and its people. Loudun, during the early 17th century, was a place deeply entwined with the Catholic faith, as were many other parts of France at the time. The convent of the Ursuline nuns, at the center of the story, was an important institution in the town, home to several young women who had taken vows of chastity and devotion. The convent, with its high walls and sacred grounds, was meant to be a place of spiritual refuge, yet it would soon become a place of fear and hysteria, where the lines between faith and madness, reality and illusion, would blur into a nightmarish landscape. The catalyst for the possession hysteria in Loudun, as it so often is with these kinds of events, was a singular individual, Urbain Grandier, a charismatic, albeit controversial, priest. Urbain Grandier was a man of great ambition and intellect, known for his eloquent sermons and his outspoken criticism of the Catholic Church's hierarchy. He had gained a reputation in Loudun as a skilled orator, a man whose words could sway even the most steadfast minds. He had also become a figure of desire, attracting the attention of many women in the village, including, it seems, several of the nuns from the convent. The tale of how Grandier's name became forever linked with the Loudun possessions is both tragic and unsettling. According to reports, Grandier was accused of seducing several of the nuns, most notably Sister Jeanne des Anges, a young nun who would later become one of the most prominent figures in the possession events. It was said that Jeanne had fallen deeply in love with Grandier, and when he rejected her advances, she sought a way to punish him for his perceived betrayal. Soon after, a strange series of events began to unfold at the convent. The nuns started displaying bizarre, uncontrollable behaviors. They would fall into fits of convulsions, screaming in agony, and speaking in strange, incomprehensible languages. The most troubling of all was the claim that they were seeing apparitions, dark, shadowy figures that hovered in the corners of their rooms and whispered words of torment into their ears. The events escalated rapidly. The nuns' behaviors grew more violent, and their accusations became more severe. They claimed to have been possessed by demons, and the names they spoke of, often invoking figures such as Satan himself, echoed through the halls of the convent. As the nuns' symptoms worsened, the people of Loudun began to panic. Was this a case of simple hysteria, or was something far darker at play? The local authorities, caught between the growing fear of demonic possession and the rising influence of the church, turned to Father Jean-Joseph Surin, a renowned exorcist, to investigate the strange occurrences. Surin, upon conducting several exorcisms, was convinced that the nuns were indeed possessed. He would later claim that the possessions were not only supernatural, but were a direct result of Grandier's actions. According to Surin, Grandier had used witchcraft to corrupt the convent, cursing the nuns and forcing them into a state of demonic enslavement. In a strange twist, Grandier was accused of using black magic to manipulate the nuns' minds, even allegedly causing the possession to spread among them. This was a period in European history marked by religious fervor, fear of witchcraft, and suspicion of anyone who defied the authority of the church. The hysteria surrounding the possession grew stronger with each passing day, culminating in an intense public trial. Grandier was arrested, tortured, and ultimately burned at the stake for his alleged role in the demonic influence over the nuns. The trial was as much a spectacle as it was a grim judicial process, attracting crowds eager to witness the dramatic showdown between religion and supposed witchcraft. As Grandier's body was consumed by the flames, the nuns, who had now been freed from their alleged possession, claimed to be healed. The village of Loudun breathed a collective sigh of relief, but the question remained: had they truly been possessed? Or had their suffering been the result of something far more human? Psychological manipulation, mass hysteria, or even the machinations of those in power? The mystery of the Loudun possessions does not end with Grandier's death. Over the years, a number of scholars and psychologists have attempted to explain the events. Some argue that the nuns were victims of a collective delusion, a phenomenon known as mass hysteria, which is known to occur when groups of people are affected by irrational fears or emotional stress. The Church's heavy-handed response and the underlying political and social tensions of the time also contributed to an atmosphere of fear and paranoia, which may have exacerbated the situation. Others believe that Grandier's apparent role in the events could have been a result of personal vendettas or political intrigue, as he had made powerful enemies within the church and the local nobility. Was Grandier truly a witch, as his accusers claimed, or was he a victim of a complex web of political and religious power plays? Yet, for some, the events of the Loudun possessions offer more than just a tale of religious zealotry or psychological hysteria. They are seen as an early example of the battle between faith and reason, of a culture caught between superstition and emerging scientific understanding. The events at Loudun would go on to influence later cases of possession and exorcism, becoming a model for future investigations into the supernatural. In fact, some have even suggested that the events at Loudun could have been the foundation for the famous exorcism of the 17th century that inspired the later, more well-known exorcisms in the modern era, such as the case of Roland Doe. But even now, centuries later, the questions linger. Were the nuns truly possessed by evil spirits, or were they merely pawns in a larger struggle between religion and power? Could it have been that the minds of these young women, oppressed by the strictures of their faith and confined within the walls of the convent, created the visions and behaviors that seemed so real to them? Or was there something more insidious at play, something that modern science and psychology have yet to fully understand? What we know for sure is that the Loudun Precursors, as they are sometimes called, remain one of the most enduring and enigmatic episodes in the history of religious hysteria. The spectral images of the possessed nuns, the wild accusations of witchcraft and demonic influence, and the final, tragic fate of Urbain Grandier all remain suspended in time, unanswered and unresolved. The very nature of possession itself continues to elude us, a question without a definitive answer. And as long as the mystery of the Loudun possessions endures, we are left to ask, what is it that lurks in the corners of our collective fears, just beyond the veil of what we can see or what we can understand? The local authorities, caught between the growing fear of demonic possession and the rising influence of the church, turned to Father Jean-Joseph Surin, a renowned exorcist, to investigate the strange occurrences. Surin, upon conducting several exorcisms, was convinced that the nuns were indeed possessed. He would later claim that the possessions were not only supernatural, but were a direct result of Grandier's actions. According to Surin, Grandier had used witchcraft to corrupt the convent, cursing the nuns and forcing them into a state of demonic enslavement. In a strange twist, Grandier was accused of using black magic to manipulate the nuns' minds, even allegedly causing the possession to spread among them. This was a period in European history marked by religious fervor, fear of witchcraft, and suspicion of anyone who defied the authority of the church. The hysteria surrounding the possession grew stronger with each passing day, culminating in an intense public trial. Grandier was arrested, tortured, and ultimately burned at the stake for his alleged role in the demonic influence over the nuns. The trial was as much a spectacle as it was a grim judicial process, attracting crowds eager to witness the dramatic showdown between religion and supposed witchcraft. As Grandier's body was consumed by the flames, the nuns, who had now been freed from their alleged possession, claimed to be healed. The village of Loudun breathed a collective sigh of relief, but the question remained: had they truly been possessed? Or had their suffering been the result of something far more human? Psychological manipulation, mass hysteria, or even the machinations of those in power? The mystery of the Loudun possessions does not end with Grandier's death. Over the years, a number of scholars and psychologists have attempted to explain the events. Some argue that the nuns were victims of a collective delusion, a phenomenon known as mass hysteria, which is known to occur when groups of people are affected by irrational fears or emotional stress. The Church's heavy-handed response and the underlying political and social tensions of the time also contributed to an atmosphere of fear and paranoia, which may have exacerbated the situation. Others believe that Grandier's apparent role in the events could have been a result of personal vendettas or political intrigue, as he had made powerful enemies within the church and the local nobility. Was Grandier truly a witch, as his accusers claimed, or was he a victim of a complex web of political and religious power plays? Yet, for some, the events of the Loudun possessions offer more than just a tale of religious zealotry or psychological hysteria. They are seen as an early example of the battle between faith and reason, of a culture caught between superstition and emerging scientific understanding. The events at Loudun would go on to influence later cases of possession and exorcism, becoming a model for future investigations into the supernatural. In fact, some have even suggested that the events at Loudun could have been the foundation for the famous exorcism of the 17th century that inspired the later, more well-known exorcisms in the modern era, such as the case of Roland Doe. But even now, centuries later, the questions linger. Were the nuns truly possessed by evil spirits, or were they merely pawns in a larger struggle between religion and power? Could it have been that the minds of these young women, oppressed by the strictures of their faith and confined within the walls of the convent, created the visions and behaviors that seemed so real to them? Or was there something more insidious at play, something that modern science and psychology have yet to fully understand? What we know for sure is that the Loudun Precursors, as they are sometimes called, remain one of the most enduring and enigmatic episodes in the history of religious hysteria. The spectral images of the possessed nuns, the wild accusations of witchcraft and demonic influence, and the final, tragic fate of Urbain Grandier all remain suspended in time, unanswered and unresolved. The very nature of possession itself continues to elude us, a question without a definitive answer. And as long as the mystery of the Loudun possessions endures, we are left to ask, what is it that lurks in the corners of our collective fears, just beyond the veil of what we can see or what we can understand? The city of London has long been steeped in legend, where ancient streets wind through centuries of hidden history. Among these stories, few are as peculiar or as mysterious as the tale of the Winchester Geese, a group of women who were, in the early 15th century, closely associated with a curious part of the city's history. To this day, their story remains one of the most enigmatic and often overlooked chapters in London's rich tapestry of secrets. The setting for this story is the area surrounding Southwark, a district that stood outside the formal boundaries of the city, separated by the great River Thames. Southwark was a world apart, a place where the conventional laws of the city did not always apply, and where many of the darker aspects of medieval London could be found in full view. It was here, in the shadow of the great Cathedral of Winchester, that the mysterious women, the so-called Winchester Geese, found their place in history. The name Winchester Geese may sound strange at first, evoking images of geese grazing in a field, perhaps, or some long-forgotten medieval folk tradition. But the term referred to something much darker. The women known by this title were, in fact, prostitutes, unfortunate souls who were part of a complex social system that tied their fate to the church, the legal system, and the very structure of medieval London society. In a world where social status was rigid and strictly defined, the geese were confined to the lowest rung of the ladder. Yet their story, and the mystery that surrounds them, invites us to question the very forces that shaped their lives. The term Winchester Geese has its roots in the powerful ecclesiastical institution that ruled the area, specifically the Bishop of Winchester. The bishopric, a vast and influential territory, held a monopoly over prostitution in Southwark. This might seem strange at first glance. How could a religious institution, tasked with enforcing moral and spiritual order, be so closely linked to the trade of sex? The answer lies in the medieval church's strange position in society at the time. The bishop's role, as the Lord of Southwark, allowed him to profit from the sex trade, while simultaneously attempting to regulate and control it. prostitutes in the area, known as Geese, were forced to pay fees to the bishop's officers in exchange for the license to practice their trade. This arrangement provided an almost cynical form of state-sanctioned prostitution, where moral contradictions became an accepted part of the social fabric. The Geese were not simply confined to the streets of Southwark. They were also associated with the brothels, known as stews, that lined the banks of the Thames. These stews, where customers could find both pleasure and peril, became notorious for their connections to the Winchester bishopric. In exchange for the right to work in these brothels, the women were expected to pay a tax to the bishop's office, a sort of tithe for their trade. In this sense, the Bishop of Winchester became an overseer of both sin and its regulation. The women, whom the city's authorities referred to as the Winchester Geese, were thus caught in a paradoxical web. They were simultaneously subjects of exploitation and subjects of control. What is perhaps most striking about the Winchester Geese is how little is actually known about their individual lives. We know they existed, and we know the broad outlines of the system they were part of, but little is understood about the women themselves. The term geese was likely a derogatory nickname, designed to mark the women as flock members, to be controlled by the powerful institutions around them. But what about their personal stories? How did they come to be involved in this system? Did they have any agency, any sense of power or resistance? These questions remain elusive, as the historical records of their lives are almost non-existent. Nestled in the quiet, undisturbed heart of Norway lies a place that has confounded scientists, intrigued adventurers, and sparked countless theories for decades. The Hessdalen Valley, a remote stretch of wilderness surrounded by jagged mountains and thick forests, is known for an eerie phenomenon that has baffled both the local population and the scientific community. For as long as anyone can remember, bright, unexplainable lights have appeared in the valley, illuminating the night sky with a mysterious and unsettling glow. The valley itself is both hauntingly beautiful and impossibly tranquil, a landscape that feels almost untouched by time. It is a place where the sounds of nature echo, where the wind rustles through dense pine trees, and where the haunting isolation feels as though it could stretch into eternity. But amidst this serene backdrop, strange things happen when the sun dips below the horizon. These Hessdalen lights, or phantom lights, as they are often referred to, are a phenomenon that has been witnessed by countless people over the years. The lights appear in various colors, ranging from bright white to yellow, red, and even blue. They often hover or drift slowly in the sky, sometimes darting across the valley before disappearing into the night, only to return again at irregular intervals. They do not resemble any known aircraft or natural weather-related phenomena. They are not reflections, nor are they any sort of man-made light. And perhaps most unnerving of all, they do not adhere to any predictable patterns or behaviors. These lights have been seen by so many, both locals and visitors, that their existence cannot be dismissed as the product of a few confused witnesses or overactive imaginations. The phenomenon has been documented for over a century, with reports dating back to the early 1800s. Yet despite extensive research and numerous investigations, the mystery of the Hessdalen lights remains unresolved. Over the years, various theories have been proposed to explain the phenomenon. Some have suggested that the lights are caused by natural electrical discharges in the atmosphere, possibly related to the valley's unique geological conditions. The presence of certain minerals in the region, such as quartz, has led some to hypothesize that these minerals might somehow contribute to the formation of the lights, causing them to appear in the sky. Others have speculated that the lights could be a result of atmospheric phenomena, such as ball lightning or St. Elmo's fire, a phenomenon where a bluish light is emitted from sharp objects, often during thunderstorms. But none of these theories have proven definitive, and the Hessdalen lights continue to defy explanation. In the 1980s, the Norwegian Institute for Atmospheric and Earth System Research, along with other scientific organizations, launched a series of investigations into the phenomenon. They set up a research station in the valley, equipped with advanced monitoring equipment, in hopes of capturing data that would help explain the lights. However, despite their efforts, the phenomenon continued to elude them. The lights would appear sporadically, sometimes at times when no atmospheric or electrical conditions were present that could explain them. As technology has advanced, so too have the theories surrounding the Hessdalen lights. With the use of infrared cameras, electromagnetic sensors, and sophisticated tracking equipment, researchers have been able to study the phenomenon in more detail. What they've found is as puzzling as it is intriguing. In some instances, the lights appear to interact with the environment, moving around trees or hovering above the ground. In other cases, they have been reported to follow cars or even seem to respond to human presence. Some have proposed that the lights might be linked to ancient myths and legends. The valley has been a sacred place for centuries, and it's not hard to imagine how its strange lights could be woven into the local folklore. In Norse mythology, light phenomena were often seen as omens or messages from the gods. Could the Hessdalen lights be a modern-day manifestation of these ancient beliefs? Could they be a sign or a warning, something meant to catch the eye and stir the imagination? Others have delved into more speculative territory, suggesting that the lights could be linked to extraterrestrial activity. The idea that the Hessdalen lights are connected to UFOs or alien visitations is one that has circulated for years. Some claim that the lights are evidence of spacecraft hovering above the valley, observing the Earth in ways that are beyond our understanding. While there is no solid evidence to support these claims, the idea of alien presence adds a layer of mystery and intrigue to an already confounding phenomenon. One of the most striking aspects of the Hessdalen lights is their apparent intelligence. Witnesses often report a sense of intention behind the movements of the lights, as though they are not random or accidental but deliberately guided by some unseen force. This sense of purpose is what sets the Hessdalen lights apart from more common natural phenomena. It is one thing to see a ball of lightning crackle across the sky, but quite another to observe a light that seems to dance in the air, responding to the movements of the observer. In recent years, interest in the Hessdalen lights has only grown. The valley has become a sort of pilgrimage site for those seeking answers to the unexplained. Researchers continue to visit, hoping that the lights will reveal their secrets, but they remain as elusive as ever. And while some continue to search for a rational, scientific explanation, there are those who believe that the mystery may never be solved, that the lights may be something beyond our understanding. For the people of the region, the Hessdalen lights have become a part of everyday life. Locals speak of the phenomenon with a mixture of curiosity and acceptance, as though it is simply something that happens in the valley, like the changing of the seasons or the rising of the sun. The lights are neither feared nor worshipped. They are simply a part of the landscape, a part of the mysterious fabric that makes Hessdalen unique. The lights themselves, though, continue to stir something deeper in the imagination. Why do they appear in this remote part of the world? Why are they so persistent? And why do they continue to elude all attempts at explanation? And what does it mean that, in a world where we've mapped the stars and sent probes to distant planets, there are still places on Earth where strange, unexplainable things happen, forces that we cannot yet understand? Perhaps, like many of the world's most compelling mysteries, the Hessdalen lights are meant to remain a riddle. A reminder that there is still much about our world, and the universe beyond, that is beyond our comprehension. Perhaps they are simply another enigma, another puzzle in the vast, untold story of our planet. Or perhaps, one day, science will unveil the truth behind them, though for now, the lights will remain in the skies, dancing over the quiet valley, waiting to reveal their secrets. And so, as we stand beneath the dark sky of Hessdalen, Looking up at the glowing orbs that hover silently above the valley, we are left with one undeniable truth. Not all mysteries are meant to be solved. Some are simply meant to be observed, to be pondered, and to leave us wondering what might still lie hidden just beyond our understanding. What is the true nature of the Hessdalen lights, and what other mysteries are waiting to be discovered in the corners of the world where the unexplained still holds sway? In the rolling hills of the Rhineland, where the Rhine River twists its way through ancient forests and sleepy villages, there is a legend that has endured for centuries, a tale as eerie as it is tragic. It centers around the mysterious disappearance of a powerful figure, Bishop Hatto II, a man whose name became synonymous with treachery, vengeance, and a fate so bizarre it has haunted the region's history for nearly 1,000 years. Bishop Hatto II ruled over the Diocese of Mainz in the late 10th century, a time when the power of the Church intertwined closely with the political landscape of medieval Europe. His tenure was marked by both ecclesiastical authority and territorial ambition, but it was his sudden and mysterious disappearance that has fueled the myths and legends surrounding him. On the surface, Bishop Hatto appeared to be a man who wielded his power with strength and determination, but beneath the layers of political ambition, darker forces seemed to stir. The story begins with an event so disturbing that it would forever be etched into the annals of local lore. In the early 11th century, the Rhineland was struck by a horrific famine. Crops had failed, and hunger gripped the land like a shadow. Desperation drove the people of the region to the brink of madness, and it was in these dire circumstances that Bishop Hatto's name became forever linked to cruelty. According to the most widely circulated version of the tale, Hatto, like many of his contemporaries, had a great estate and the power to control the land's resources. However, instead of offering help to his starving people, the bishop was said to have taken a much darker path. Driven by greed and a desire to keep the wealth of his lands intact, he decided to do the unthinkable. He ordered the local peasants, many of whom had sought refuge in his stronghold, to be burned alive. The rationale behind this gruesome decision is still debated. Some say he feared the masses would rebel and seize his riches. Others believe it was a purely ruthless act of consolidation of power in a time of fear. Regardless, the outcome was catastrophic. The villagers, desperate and starving, were lured into a massive granary, supposedly under the pretense of receiving food, only to find themselves locked in. Then, Hatto ordered the building to be set alight. Flames engulfed the structure, and in the chaos, hundreds of innocent lives were lost in a night of horror. The tale of the burning of the peasants became legend, one that would be forever associated with Bishop Hatto. But the most chilling aspect of this dark chapter in history is not just the bishop's heartless decision. It is the revenge that came soon after. According to the myth, the very same night of the massacre, a strange and unexplainable phenomenon occurred. As the fire raged, the night sky was said to be filled with the sound of thousands of rats, a swarming noise that echoed across the land. The rats, some claim, were the spirits of the dead peasants, seeking vengeance for their untimely end. The story says that a massive swarm of rats overran Hatto's castle in the days following the fire. They were said to have devoured everything in their path, including the bishop himself. The rats, relentless in their pursuit of vengeance, eventually swarmed into his tower, where the bishop attempted to escape. No matter how high he climbed, no matter how secure the room seemed, the rats found him, and it is said that they gnawed away at his body until nothing remained but the bones of a once feared ruler. This gruesome end, as strange and unsettling as it sounds, has persisted in the folklore surrounding Bishop Hatto II. But did this truly happen, or is it simply the product of a myth meant to explain an enigmatic disappearance? Some historians argue that the story of the rats may have been embellished over the centuries, an allegory for the wrath of the people seeking revenge on an unjust ruler. Others point to the historical records of the bishop's life and his eventual disappearance, suggesting that the true fate of Bishop Hatto is not nearly as dramatic or as macabre as legend would have us believe. One theory is that Bishop Hatto, facing pressure from both the church and the royal court, fled his post in the aftermath of the famine and the massacre. Some suggest that he took refuge in the surrounding mountains or fled to a neighboring country, seeking safety from the wrath of both peasants and nobility. However, no concrete evidence exists to support this claim, and the disappearance of Hatto remains shrouded in uncertainty. Another possibility is that the story of the rats was a poetic creation, intended to give a sense of justice to the seemingly unjust death of so many innocent people. Could the story have been invented to illustrate the retribution that would ultimately come for such a vile act? The question remains open to interpretation. Whether the rats swarmed the bishop's tower and consumed him alive, or whether his fate was simply one of exile or even death by natural causes, it is clear that the mystery surrounding his disappearance has continued to provoke deep curiosity. Local legend holds that the site of the bishop's burning, the granary where the peasants met their tragic end, became a cursed ground, haunted by the restless souls of those who died in the flames. In the centuries that followed, it is said that strange occurrences plagued the area. Travelers passing by the site would report hearing screams in the night or seeing shadowy figures lurking among the ruins. Some claim to have glimpsed the ghostly figure of a man, cloaked in the garb of a bishop, wandering among the fields, searching for redemption, or perhaps fleeing from something far more sinister. Historians have long been divided over the truth of the legend of the rats. Some dismiss it as folklore, an exaggerated tale crafted by a vengeful populace seeking to punish Hatto for his cruelty. Others, however, suggest that there may be an element of truth to the story, citing reports of strange occurrences in the area and the eerie silence that often envelops the ruins of the bishop's castle. Could it be that the sins of the past are still being felt today, their echoes reverberating through the centuries? Or is it possible that the rats, as symbols of revenge, were simply part of a larger narrative designed to reflect the deep social unrest of the time? What is certain is that the story of Bishop Hatto II is not just a tale of one man's greed and brutality, but also a reflection of the human desire for justice and retribution. The bizarre and tragic fate of Hatto, whether real or mythic, serves as a reminder of the power of storytelling to shape history and to help us make sense of the darkness that sometimes lurks in the human soul. The legend of the rats that devoured Bishop Hatto has endured because it speaks to something primal in all of us. It is a tale of greed, of cruelty, and of a twisted kind of justice that transcends time. And while we may never know the true fate of Bishop Hatto II, the mystery of his disappearance remains as compelling as ever, leaving us to wonder if some legends are born from truth, or if they are simply born to last. As the centuries pass, the story of Bishop Hatto and the terrible vengeance of the rats continues to haunt the imagination. Did Hatto truly meet his grisly end at the jaws of thousands of rats? Or is it just another piece of folklore designed to make sense of a complex and tragic history? Whatever the truth may be, it remains locked in the annals of history, a mystery that will continue to captivate and perplex those who seek to uncover the secrets of the past. The year was 1212, and Europe was immersed in a fervor of religious zeal, a time when the call to crusade had echoed through the lands for nearly 2 centuries. Yet, among the many crusades that defined this dark chapter in history, there was one that stood apart, strange, unsettling, and shrouded in mystery. It was the Children's Crusade, a movement that saw thousands of innocent youths, spurred by divine inspiration, march toward the Holy Land to reclaim it for Christianity. but rather than victory, it would be a tale of inexplicable disappearance and unsolved enigmas. The story begins in France, where two distinct groups of children, fueled by a belief that their innocence and faith could conquer the Muslim forces in Palestine, set out with hopes of reaching Jerusalem. These children, some as young as 10 or 12 years old, were urged forward by leaders who claimed divine visions. Their march was, at its core, a strange blend of religious fervor, desperation, and naive hope, making it a moment in history that feels almost too strange to believe. The first group, led by a young shepherd named Stephen, is said to have gathered more than 30,000 children, and together they set off on foot toward the Mediterranean. Their mission was clear: reclaim the city of Jerusalem from Muslim control and restore Christianity to its rightful place. But before they could even make it to the coast, disaster struck. Along the way, many of the children succumbed to the harsh conditions, starvation, illness, and exhaustion, until only a fraction remained. And yet, despite this tragic start, the second part of the crusade remains just as bizarre and tragic. According to one account, those who reached the Mediterranean coast were intercepted by merchants who promised to ferry the children to the Holy Land. They too were driven by the belief that these innocent souls, untainted by the sins of adulthood, could achieve divine victory. But once on the ships, the children's fate took a more sinister turn. Some stories claim that the merchants betrayed the children, selling them into slavery to the Muslims in North Africa. Other accounts tell of the ships being swallowed by a storm, or the children being taken away in chains, never to be seen again. The fate of the thousands of children who embarked on this tragic crusade is still uncertain. Some were sold into slavery, others died in unmarked graves along the shores of distant lands. But what happened to the majority of them? Why did so many disappear, their names lost to history? The lack of concrete evidence and conflicting accounts only deepens the mystery. The survivors, if any, left behind no records of their experiences. No letters, no testimonies, no final messages. Only fragmented reports from the few who managed to return, often carrying with them only the faintest traces of what had transpired. Even more peculiar is the complete absence of records from the Muslim side. There is no documentation of a battle, no mention of these children arriving in Palestine. It is as if the entire event had simply been erased from the historical record, leaving behind only whispers of a vanished crusade. As we sift through the layers of history, the puzzle grows more perplexing. One theory suggests that the children's crusade was not a literal attempt to reclaim Jerusalem at all, but rather a metaphor for the loss of innocence in a world gone mad with war. The crusade, after all, was born out of an impossible dream, fueled by religious fervor and youthful idealism. Perhaps, in the grand scheme of things, it was always doomed to failure, its participants too young and naive to survive the harsh realities of the world. But others have entertained a darker, more mysterious possibility: that the disappearance of the children was not merely the result of natural causes or ill-advised leadership. Instead, some propose that the Crusaders were victims of a broader, more sinister conspiracy. Could they have been deliberately sold into slavery to finance the continuation of the Crusades? Were the children intentionally sacrificed to further the ambitions of the religious leaders of the time? Or did something more supernatural play a role in their fate? There are also those who suggest that the children's crusade was a kind of mass psychosis, a collective delusion that swept through medieval Europe. Could it be that, in their desperation and fervor, the children were influenced by powerful religious movements and charismatic leaders who preyed on their innocence? Could the children have been swept up in an apocalyptic fervor that led them to march not only into the unknown, but also into their own deaths? Some modern theorists point to psychological phenomena like mass hysteria or collective delusion as possible explanations, though these ideas, too, remain speculative. Perhaps the most disturbing theory, however, is that there was more to the disappearance than even betrayal or disaster. Some suggest that the Children's Crusade was simply swept away by the tides of history, their story buried under layers of time. Could there be a deeper, more metaphysical reason for their disappearance? Could the very act of their journey, driven by a sense of religious purity and unwavering belief, have marked them as untouchable by history? In this sense, the vanishing of the Children's Crusade could be viewed as a tragic but inevitable end to a quest that was as much about the purity of faith as it was about the futility of human ambition. Of course, all of these theories raise more questions than they answer. Why was this story left out of the broader historical record? Why did no major chroniclers of the time mention the children's disappearance? Was this an intentional erasure of an event too embarrassing or inconvenient to acknowledge? Or was it simply lost, like so many other aspects of medieval history, to the passage of time and the complexities of historical documentation? One tantalizing clue may lie in the place where the children set out, the city of Marseille, which became an important port for the Crusaders as they journeyed toward the Holy Land. This port is said to have been home to a mysterious group of merchants, some of whom were known to have engaged in the trade of human beings. Could these merchants have played a role in the disappearance of the children, either through betrayal or exploitation? Equally intriguing are the historical accounts that suggest a link between the Children's Crusade and other lost Crusader expeditions, including the mysterious and failed attempts to establish Christian kingdoms in North Africa. Was the Children's Crusade simply an extension of these more ambitious and doomed projects? Could the fate of the children be tied to the broader collapse of the crusading movement, a wave of idealism and violence that left destruction in its wake? Yet, despite the theories, no one can say for sure what happened to the children of the Crusade. Their fate remains one of history's great mysteries, shrouded in the dust of centuries and marked only by the haunting absence of the young souls who disappeared. Were they lost to the unforgiving lands of North Africa? Did they vanish beneath the waves of the Mediterranean? Or did they meet an even darker fate, one that history was unwilling or unable to record? As we reflect on the enigma of the Children's Crusade, we are left with one undeniable truth. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved, but only to be pondered. The vanishing of the children may remain one of history's most unsettling and unresolved questions, a ghostly reminder of the limits of human knowledge and the shadowy paths where history, myth, and mystery collide. What might still lie hidden? The answer, as elusive as it is tragic, may never be known. But for those who dare to ask the question, the mystery of the Children's Crusade endures, a testament to the power of faith, the cost of idealism, and the inescapable darkness that can accompany the most ambitious of dreams.